To our Finance and Performance meeting for June. I'll start with apologies, and as you can gather by the fact that we started so late, we've got a few. So we have got Councillor Sayers for absence on council business, attending the Kaipara Moana meeting in Wellsford. Mayor Goff for lateness. Councillors Newman and Taipri for lateness. So those are the apologies so far. Do I have a seconder if I move those apologies? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. We also have a request for attendance by electronic link from Councillor Fletcher, Collins and Dalton. Do I have a seconder for that, please, Deputy Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Councillor Collins, are you online? Councillor Dalton, are you online?
Yes, I am, Chair.
Yes, I am, Chair.
I hope your family is all right, Councillor Collins, and I hope you're okay, Councillor Dalton. Councillor Fletcher? Not yet. Okay, coming. Right, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Thank you very much. I'd now like to confirm two sets of minutes, both the 20th of May open and confidential and the 25th of May open. As a true and correct record, have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. I have no petitions. I have no public input. I do have local board input, but that will be taken at the beginning of C1, obviously before the item that we discussed that they want to talk about. I have no extraordinary items, so we go straight into now our second round of presentations from the Auckland Regional Amenities. And I welcome to the front Richard Papatato and Nicola Keane-Biglar from Drowning Prevention Auckland. Morena and good morning. Now, I just want to remind you that when you want to talk, the little red button, that's it.
Kia ora ana, it's Pamatatau. Good morning, everybody. I'm Richard Pamatatau, and I'm the Chair of Drowning Prevention Auckland. I'm here on behalf of the board and with our Chief Executive, Nicola. We'd like to thank you for your generosity so far, and to thank the ARAFA board for its continued support of what we do, which we believe helps contribute to Auckland being the most livable city in the world. I'm now going to hand over to the Chief Executive, Nicola.
Kia ora everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to address you this morning and for the first time in my role as Chief Executive of Drowning Prevention Auckland. As Richard has already acknowledged, the last 12 months have been a testing time for leadership, resiliency and ensuring that our community needs are still met. I look forward to sharing with you this morning our key achievements over the last 12 months, some of our challenges and the exciting initiatives that we are embarking on in the year ahead. Firstly, though, I'd like to reiterate my thanks to Auckland Council for their support of DPA through the Auckland Regional Amenities Funding Act levy. It is an enormous privilege to be a specified amenity, and as such, here in service of Auckland's residents and ratepayers. This privilege was significantly apparent through COVID-19, when our funding, albeit reduced from what had been anticipated, enabled me to retain staff and the intellectual property that they have in drowning prevention. Thank you for your support. Drowning Prevention Auckland is the lead and only agency in Auckland with the sole purpose of educating to reduce the number of drownings of our residents and visitors. With 3 harbours, 2 coastlines, 411 kilometres of rivers and 128 kilometres of lake edge, the need is great to educate both residents and ratepayers and visitors to Auckland about how to enjoy our beautiful waterways safely. When looking at national data, the Auckland region has one of the lowest drowning rates in New Zealand, despite the increased exposure due to relatively warm climate, the higher risk with so much water surrounding us, and the higher ethnic diversity. That said, in 2020, there were 15 fatal drownings and 67 non-fatal drownings or hospitalisations. 1 drowning is too many. The need is great, and there is more to do. Over the last 5 years to 2020, in Auckland, 78% of fatal drownings have been male, 18% to age 15 to 24, 32% drowned swimming, 38% drowned at beaches, and increasingly we are seeing older adults drowning, with 20% of fatal drownings in the over 65 age group. That sets the scene for drowning within Auckland, and I now would like to outline some of our key achievements in working to bring this toll down further. Our key achievements this year have been continued delivery despite 12 weeks of COVID alert level impacts. the ability to be agile and adaptive in our methods of education with continued lockdowns. We have utilised podcasts, webinars, and have seen growth and use of our e-learning platform. Growth in partnerships, and a particular note, an improved relationship with Water Safety New Zealand. We also continue to have a positive working relationship with Auckland Council and Surf Lifesaving Northern Region on a number of initiatives, and of note is our 15-year partnership on West Coast rock fishing. We've established 5 life jacket hubs to encourage use of life jackets at a nominal cost. 3 of these in partnership with Coast Guard at the units in Kaipara, Papakura and North Shore, and 1 of these at Bethel Surf Club with bilingual signage to connect with Mandarin-speaking rock fishers. Nearly 25,000 participants in drowning prevention education across the whole spectrum, early childhood, primary, secondary, tertiary, and adults in community settings. We've appointed an Asian advisor given the growing number of Asians drowning within Auckland and have seen significant uptake and engagement from Korean and Chinese communities. We continue our bespoke programs that are tailored to the different ethnicities that make up Auckland. Growth in our workplace education continues to increase with the training of lifeguards, aquatic first aid courses and emergency care training for pool facilities, including those run by Auckland Council. We've had a successful water safety initiative at Hanua Falls in partnership with YMCA, Water Safety New Zealand and Auckland Council Rangers. This also included the first freshwater site identified on the Safe Swim platform, including hazard messaging for a waterfall environment. This platform is excellent and we look forward to providing further hazard and safety messaging for non-coastal environments where appropriate. We've commenced providing Water Skills for Life, previously known as the GAP program, in 3 schools over Term 4 and Term 1, and this will grow in the year ahead. With the support of Water Safety New Zealand and Foundation North, our Kai Moana program that teaches Māori communities about safe diving practice grew with 6 additional wānanga provided across Auckland and the far north. Our key challenges this year have been purely in relation to COVID-19. Impact on program delivery and momentum has existed, with our face-to-face delivery halted in level 3 and above. Schools and community groups have been nervous and slow to re-engage in education from outside providers, even when alert levels would mean that would be possible. Staff wellbeing and safety, ongoing alert levels has had an impact on mental health and people's ability to be resilient. We've also had many discussions about how do we keep our team safe and what can we do and what can't we do in terms of a COVID vaccine. Our dependency on funding was significantly heightened in a COVID-impacted world. Funders with reduced fund availability, grants on hold and not being able to deliver, this then impacted our ability to access additional funding because of our own capacity constraints to then deliver. Innovation and growth has been on hold and this will have a long-term effect. It is important to note and thank those funders that invested in us at increased levels during this time: Foundation North, Water Safety New Zealand, Ethnic Community Development Fund and Maritime New Zealand. Another key challenge has been demonstrating the return on investment and the value of education. Education is often the first thing that is sacrificed when the outcomes are not as demonstrable as rescue, as an example. I believe both are needed in equal measure. If our communities know how to keep themselves safe, then there will be less pressure placed on our volunteer reliant rescue organisations. So to finish with some positivity and some of our initiatives for the year ahead, many of these are very exciting. The first is leading, alongside Water Safety New Zealand, a water safety strategy for Auckland. The aim is a coordinated and collaborative action plan for water safety in Auckland that identifies priority work streams and investments for drowning prevention. The ultimate outcome is reduced drowning deaths and injuries and a culture of safe enjoyment around water in the Auckland region. There will be 4 work streams and investment priorities: water safety skills and competency development, recreational boating safety, open water safety, and beach and ocean safety. A key challenge as a specified amenity is accessing additional funding from other philanthropic funders, and therefore we are anticipating an increase in our request of the ARAFA board this year to support the strategy development process. The second initiative is continuing to grow our digital footprint and invest in blended ways of learning. We know that experiential learning is best for embedding drowning prevention education. Learning skills in the classroom, testing them in a pool environment, and then seeing how competent you are in an open water environment is the beauty and success of scaffolded learning. It is best practice. The approach is compromised if we have to go to online delivery of our education, yet we are committed to blended online learning with face-to-face education where possible. And the third is continuing to grow our delivery, so doing more as resourcing, both financial and people allow. And finally, we're establishing a Pacific Water Safety Advisory Group to provide guidance and recommendations to DPA on the development and design of plans and programs to improve the quality and consistency of drowning prevention to Pacific peoples. So in closing, thank you again to the Auckland Council for your support of DPA and the other specified amenities through the Auckland Regional Amenities Funding Act. We have more to do, we have more innovative work to invest in, and we look forward to continuing to serve Auckland's residents, ratepayers and visitors so that they are safe in, on and around the water. Now I invite any questions.
Thank you very much. That was a very enlightening presentation. First question from Councillor Henderson.
Thanks, Chair. One of the big issues that we have, particularly in my ward, is around fishing off the rocks on the west coast. And yeah, terrifying, and we've lost lives there, and it's a big anxiety for people that live out there. I'm wondering whether DPA is interested in kind of getting involved in that kaupapa, and how can we work together to raise awareness on the risks?
So we've been working for 15 years with Council and Surf Life Saving Northern Region out there, and the research that we continue to do shows that the problem is continual because we have new migrants to Auckland that are unaware of the risks. So there is more work to do around how we can reach people earlier so that they know the risks out on the rocks. The life jacket hub that we've established at Bethel's Beach was, again, trying to be a little bit more innovative, going, what we have done up till now still isn't working. People are still drowning there. How about if we made life jackets more accessible? And what if the signage was actually appropriate so that people can understand that wearing life jackets when you're fishing off the rocks is imperative? So we look forward to seeing if that works and sharing that with you in time.
Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Young.
Thank you for your job and the work, and particularly in the Asian Committee in Auckland. And just take the opportunity, appreciate the last time your staff make the translation, which is article wrote by Councillor Henderson in Mandarin and Korea, which is the awareness of the fishing. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Filipina. A comment then. Yes, please. Yep.
Tēnā korua. So good to catch up with you, Nicola and Richard. Good to see you still doing the mahi around this place. So just want to mihi to you both. My comment is I was part of the previous Auckland water safety when I was in the police. So seeing now what had started in the beginning to now, just want to acknowledge the work that has been done, and also I think the relationship you have with Water Safe New Zealand, that I think has been a very good move from where it was before. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, because I think it's important that the people around this table know that the relationship is strong now between Drowning Prevention Auckland and Water Safe New Zealand. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora, thank you. Question, comment from Member Blair.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you, Richard, korua, for the presentation. Just following up on Councillor Henderson's comment, as Richard knows, I spend a lot of time on the West Coast surfing or enjoying my time out there. I see a lot of quite poor decision making from fishermen and also novice surfers who seen firsthand people die, which isn't a nice thing for young lifeguards to have to experience. Is there any kind of way in which council could consider, or in your way, to prevent people from actually walking on those rocks to go fishing? And is there any kind of enforcement that you have seen or researched to actually prevent people from either fishing on the rocks, or people that I see swimming outside flagged areas, they just continue to go straight out, ignore the lifeguards, create an incredible amount of stress and time for those volunteer lifeguards. Is there anything that you think that could, because I see the West Coast is a very dangerous spot, and I've been surfing there for 30 years. So have you got any ideas on that?
It's a great question, and I'd love to explore that more. Kind of in relation to this, we are doing some research around PRE across the water environment, so what is appropriate, and would really like to acknowledge Auckland Council for their commitment to keeping the PRE up to date and serviced. You know, there's a real high attention to detail over the West Coast in terms of that. But certainly it's something for us to consider more deeply.
Just a follow-up comment, because I just see them walking straight past those signs. They don't care. They put their lives at risk, and then they put others' lives at risk who are forced to save them. So yeah, if we could think outside of signage, and I'd encourage you to anyway. Kia ora.
Look, thank you very much. You've obviously poked a very interesting topic around the table, and I think there's a natural follow-up meeting potentially with yourselves, Councillor Young, Councillor Henderson, Member Blair, Councillor Cooper, also from the West, to actually just have a bit of a korero and a bit of a chat about what we could do collectively. Many heads make, light work, for a better word. So I just think that might be a natural follow-up. So thank you, Councillor Henderson and Cove, and you, Councillor Young, and everybody actually for bringing that up. That's a really, really good point. Yes, congratulations on obviously the work you're doing, making us one of the lowest regions in New Zealand with as far as drowning statistics go. But as you say, one is one too many. So please keep up the good work. I hope our little bit of extra this year will help you around with that. And more importantly, I think that we can have some follow-up meetings and help you on that West Coast issue as well. So thank you very much. Kia ora tātou. Have a great day. Right, now we have New Zealand Opera, and I welcome Annabelle Holland, Thomas, Stefan and Joanne.
Tēnā koutou katoa, mihi ana ki te roe whanui, ki ngā mona, ki ngā wā me ngā mātāwaka, mihi mai oha, he mihi aroha ki a koutou katoa. Ki te konihera o Tamaki Makoro, ki ngā kai hapai me i ngā kai totoko o te kopapane, ko tēne te mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. Ko Thomas Damale Burgess toku ingoa, tumoa ki a ho ke New Zealand Opera ho e mahi ana. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Thomas Damale Burgess. I'm General Director at New Zealand Opera. With me is Annabelle Holland, Chair of New Zealand Opera, Joanne Cole, our Director of Participation, and Stefan Sinclair, our Director of Finance and Administration. We will now begin our presentation. Despite the massive COVID adjustments and disruptions to our normal business, we still reached close to 20,000 people, both paid and free attendees, over 200,000 through digital views, and more than 1,600 people took part in our activities during the year. Marvellous. Semaphore. So this is the slide that accompanies that. Really sort of a top line figures of how we dealt with the last rather challenging period during COVID. So New Zealand Opera is reimagining what opera might mean in New Zealand to make New Zealand Opera a more relevant and inclusive national cultural organisation that serves a wider audience in Auckland and throughout Aotearoa. 2020 presented significant challenges. The New Zealand Opera team responded to everything thrown at it with great agility, patience, innovation, and with absolute dedication to our artists and audiences. We were forced to postpone our new production of The Marriage of Figaro and cancel over 80 participation activities. However, despite COVID lockdowns, the company was able to deliver tangible outcomes against all of our strategic goals. Part of Auckland Council's Music in Park series, we relocated this free annual concert to Glover Park from Dingle Dell in 2020 due to its popularity. This free event attracts more than 3,000 people and growing, and allows us to feature and celebrate a diverse lineup of kaiwaiata singers. In 2020, we presented 3 site-specific productions on the streets of Auckland, at Ellen Melville Centre, in a room at Hotel de Brett, and at the Holy Trinity Cathedral in Parnell. These productions attracted new audiences and new partnerships, bringing hundreds of people into the heart of the city. This resulted in 16% first-time opera-goers attending The Human Voice, the highest uptake of under 25-year-old tickets for $25 ever for a production by this company, and over 3,000 people attending Semele at the Holy Trinity Cathedral in Parnell, which was sold out. In 2020, we saw singers return from overseas, and we were able to pivot by planning smaller events at short notice to offer these affected singers work and engage our audience. Our relationship with the Auckland Museum is now an ongoing one, as we presented a world-class lineup of talent for one night only at the museum, which was sold out. And we repeated this successful concert at St Matthew's in the city the following week. At New Zealand Opera, we're supporting the development of new opera. 624 was a project that was designed to discover new creative voices and challenge preconceptions about what opera is as an art form. The opportunity resonated as we'd hoped across cultures, regions, languages, and heritage, with 110 applicants aged 11 to 57. This included writers, composers, singers, and instrumentalists. We have since been involved in a pitch to the Ministry of Arts, Culture and Heritage to fund a further extension of this concept for national television. Other works in development include The Unruly Tourists, Dua, Prayer for Broken Shelter, and The Strangest of Angels. Also, in the past year, we reframed our artist development program to offer a more robust schedule of coaching and professional development for 3 singers and a pianist. We developed our training program to include a director, and we continued to build educational partnerships, including involvement with University of Auckland, AUT, and secondary schools. 2020 also presented a golden opportunity to push into the digital realm. During lockdown, TVNZ1 screened our 2015 production of Tosca with audio description, receiving over 21,000 views on national television and over 200,000 internationally. We were delighted with the response. While still in level 2, we initiated other digital projects to involve singers affected by lockdown and connect with our isolated audience. For example, a series of Mother's Day serenades. Our site-specific work, Semele, was filmed by Greenstone Productions for presentation in 2021, and we're currently in discussions with 3 broadcasters about distribution of this great New Zealand-made opera film. I'll now hand over to our Director of Participation, Joanne Cole.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Joanne Cole, toku ingoa. We remain committed to nurturing the next generation of opera lovers by providing accessible entry points to this immersive art form for our tamariki and rangatahi. Our annual Opera in Schools tour, workshops, design and vocal, dress rehearsal attendance, student ambassador access, pre-show talks, masterclasses. We also deliver participation activities devised to remove barriers to communities who may experience them, such as young families and members of our low vision and blind community. Our annual open day, free concerts, working alongside teen parent units, delivering the globally renowned Lullaby Project as a partner of Carnegie Hall, and guided touch tours and audio-described performances. Despite COVID cancellations, pardon me, we've returned undaunted, just with frogs in our throats, in 2021. Our Opera in Schools tour achieving its highest reach yet to date, 12,000 tamariki and kayako, despite the snap Auckland lockdown costing us 1 week of scheduled Auckland performances mid-tour. We're grateful for the enduring support of Four Winds, our school's partner, and Foundation North, recently funding nearly 200 Auckland and Northland rangatahi and their whānau travelling to meet us and this art form for the first time at the Kiri Te Kanawa Theatre. The lockdown provided an opportunity to focus our commitment to authentically engage with and embark on the company's desired bicultural journey. Te Amakura Consultancy was engaged and the agenda was further developed. This was assisted for 6 months by our Toi Māori intern, Awhimai Fraser, with mentor support from Tania Heke. The addition of Tūtiramai New Zealand consultants further supported staff capability alongside Te Amakura as tikanga and cultural competency advisors. Awhimai now sits as participation coordinator and Kai Hare Ao, a newly established role developed to tautoko the company in further progressing and implementing the bicultural agenda. It is also key for our company to hold all staff in a safe and encouraging environment as we jump on board this bicultural waka, and we therefore began this year with an all-staff marae wānanga at the Mataatua Marae in Mangere, also attended by our board chair. Ongoing wānanga includes an all-staff New Zealand Opera Waiata workshop with board representation, Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori 2021, performing at the 2021 Korone Hana for the first time, and Te Tiratio Waitangi workshop, which will end our year. Popoia te kakano kia puawai, we intend to nurture the seeds we have been planting so that they may blossom into pathways for future generations. Kia ora, Thomas.
Ihitaya Vea Star Navigator, a new work by Tim Finn and Celestine Hitiura Vaita, tells the story of Tupaya and James Cook on the maiden voyage of the Endeavour. The production was staged at Vodafone Events Centre in Manukau with Manukau Symphony Orchestra, Auckland Choral and the Graduate Choir in New Zealand, all new partnerships for New Zealand Opera. 47% of the audience was new to New Zealand Opera. The Minister for Arts and Culture, the Honourable Carmel Sapoloni, attended and has endorsed our company for the ability to be able to present traditional productions alongside exciting new works that are unique to Aotearoa. We've just concluded a highly successful Auckland season of Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro at the Kiri Te Kanawa Theatre, Aotea Centre. Over 6,000 people saw the show in Auckland. I'll now hand over finally to our Director of Finance, Stephen Sinclair.
In the December 2020 year, New Zealand Opera spent $4.7 million on Auckland delivery and infrastructure, which equates to 87% of all our direct economic activity that was in or for Auckland. In the year December 2021, although as a proportion of our overall spending is down to 70% due to an ability to tour, in actual dollars we are budgeting to increase that to $4.8 million. The $1.1 million from Auckland City Council through the Auckland Regional Amenities Funding Board facilitates 4 times that level of direct economic value for Auckland through our company. Some of our key areas of spend are listed for both 2020 and 2021, with just over $1 million spent on people in 2020 practicing their specialised craft, including creatives, principal artists, chorus, music staff, technical crew and orchestras. This is going to increase to a budget of $1.08 million in 2021. In 2020, we spent $141,000 on accommodation and living allowances in Auckland, and this is increasing to $266,000 in 2021. Our marketing and production costs, which include set, costume, prop constructions, lighting, logistics, production filming, were $603,000 in 2020 and budgeted at $576,000 in 2021. Total delivery for projects in Auckland was $1.8 million in 2020 and will increase to a budget of $2.1 million in 2021. Our infrastructure spend ensures permanent employment of our Auckland team, a headcount of 20, for office, rehearsal, storage, manufacturing spaces, and our ability to put productions on stage, drive our participation in outreach programs and our diversity strategies, support and develop emerging artists, facilitate new work, engage with supporters, sponsors, funders, and maintain compliance with regulatory requirements such as health and safety and financial. It also allows us the ability to adapt as we did during the COVID lockdowns in 2020. Thomas.
Looking ahead, we have an exciting new co-production with Black Grace coming up in September. This is a dance opera with 2 highly specialised Auckland companies working together to deliver a truly unique New Zealand opera production. The time is right to tell our own stories and find a wider audience for opera in Aotearoa. We are hugely grateful for the tautoko of Auckland Council through the ARAFB. Your incredible support is the reason we can continue to make Tamaki Makaurau the national headquarters of opera and push ahead with our mission to make opera for everyone. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, thank you very much for that very informative presentation. Our first question goes to Councillor Kuhn.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. Kia ora koutou. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you for your presentation. It's very comprehensive. And thank you for the opportunity to attend the marriage of Whiro. That was a beautiful evening. I can't, in terms of the context of this presentation, ignore the concerns that have been raised directly with me about the circumstances of the departure of 3 of your directors and concerns that have been raised about the expenditure on artists compared with administration and a whole lot of other issues that have been brought to my attention. And I just wonder, this might not be the forum that you want to speak to that, but if there's an opportunity that we could find, Madam Chair, a way in which we can get into some more details so that you can actually respond directly, so we can get a fuller understanding, because I think this is at a very high level context, but when Auckland Council is putting over $1 million into New Zealand Opera, we can't ignore issues when they're raised with us. So kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. The Auckland Regional Amenities Funding Board that we meet with regularly, both as part of our ongoing responsibilities, but also sometimes as part of our request to talk about various matters internal to the company. Those meetings have been ongoing and are ongoing and are often very detailed in their discussions. It allows for that granular discussion and questioning by members of the funding board of the company. Any period of change is very challenging, and this company, for the first time in its history, last year published an annual report that was quite detailed, both in terms of finances as well as other aspects of the managing of the company. Part of that is a general move towards transparency. I know that our chair, Annabel Holland, also wants to say something on that point.
Tēnā koe, Chair. Tēnā koutou katoa, councillors. Can I just reiterate how grateful we are for the support from Auckland Council and also from the funding board. When it comes to the governance, the board had approved the 2022 program and budget in March, and we reconfirm our commitment to that and also to our strategic agenda and direction, the detail of which you've seen more of today. I welcome having a more intimate conversation at a future point. And also just to say that immediately I was in touch with the chair of the Auckland Regional Fundings Board so that she was and the board were completely across where New Zealand Opera was at when we had those resignations. We have 7 board members on the board. So 2 from Wellington and myself from Christchurch, and then the remaining 4 are in Auckland. And I am always aware of succession planning for governors, and so I've been researching that along the way, and I'm very confident that soon we'll be able to announce some new governors there. Just to inform that decision making, we have a skills matrix that provides us with a clear framework of the skills that we need around the board table to be able to guide and support a modern opera company. And it's very clear where we need to be looking, and that has always been in my foresight with governors. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I just clarify, Madam Chair? So, what is? Am I hearing that it's best for me to take those concerns to a RAFA and go through that mechanism, or are you offering that?
I'm happy to have a conversation. Myself, we're transparent about things. I don't know, Chair. You might have
my process, because obviously a RAFA is our filter, for want of a better word. That's the governance framework of which council works through. So my first suggestion to you, councillor, is to talk to Anita directly, and then potentially have a meeting with anybody else, from New Zealand Opera as well. But go to Anita in the first instance, because they hold the governance responsibility to liaise directly with the amenities. I mean, the fact that we have them here is to give us a higher level of transparency over our funding, but they are the filter and they hold the relationship. Okay, thank you for that. Next question or comment from Member Blair.
Kanui te mihi atu ki a koutou, te poari, te tumu whakarai e Thomas, i tō mihi puakina mai i te tīmatatanga o tēnei hui o te rā ki a koutou te tiamana, a tēnā koe hoki o te rā koutou katoa. I just want to really commend you on your bicultural journey. It's very obvious that your board and senior executive take it very seriously. I think you're an example for that. I work in a lot of corporates and don't see that a lot amongst the board who are non-Māori, who have a command of te reo. So I really want to keep encouraging you in any way I can support you, or the IMSB, or we would do that. Certainly this council could take a observation that would be a great journey for us all to have a command of te reo Māori and bicultural approach. Putting the board kaupapa aside, I'd just be fair to say and have a comment that opera hasn't really been in a Māori world, and so I looked at the content that you've got, your whakatauki, employing people to take care of kaupapa Māori, tikanga Māori is to be commended, and I believe that it will show that in diversity that you'll get growth amongst the Māori and Pacific community. I think having a bicultural relationship that you have and a bicultural strategy will allow other ethnic minorities to feel that they can enter through the door of opera. Certainly it's a strange world to me, but I'm not. But seeing that you have a strategy like this, it's piqued my interest too, and it will pique other Māori interest. How has this journey of biculturalism impacted on your company? Could you comment there?
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. It was incredibly revealing for us to begin the year with the Wānanga Marae visit at Matatua Marae. The emotion was not far beneath the surface, and I think it has served as a unifying force for all of us, and to consider perhaps the trap or the first reaction is to try to add a Māori layer to what you're doing, and the difference between working in that realm or from that viewpoint to actually embracing a te ao Māori perspective is immensely different. So it is a journey for all of us, and we have needed support with reactions from some of our long-standing supporters and benefactors. This is a time of change for everyone. I think there have been examples in a commercial sense with some businesses we can all think of who have also encountered this kind of pushback in a very public forum. But for us, we are also interested in the relationships and the organic growth and doing things authentically. We're incredibly grateful to have the support of the consultants we have working alongside us, which helps build our confidence. And I would say, without sounding grand, I think that every question we have has been met with grace and patience and understanding. So we're hugely grateful for that. Even if it's devising mihi, we're now at a stage where we have our own booklet to work from, or that kind of thing. So kind of kicking off the training wheels and starting to build that capability amongst the staff. Is there anything?
Yeah. Could I just add, we actually sang a waiata at the opening of Marriage of Figaro. And so for the company, that really is quite a moment for us to step publicly, and also Thomas's mihi. So kia ora.
Kia ora. As a part-time trying to be wannabe bass singer in kapaka, I just want to commend you, and any if there's any open days I might to try and come and sing, I'd probably take it up. So kia ora koutou.
I look forward to that. Kia ora. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair, and kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I just want to thank you also for the invitation to Marriage of Figaro. I have never been to an opera before, and I thought since you were coming here and our involvement with you, that I thought it was important to see. I'm very supportive and interested in the arts. I like going to theatre and concerts and galleries and things, but opera has never been something that I have felt attracted to or understood. So I thought it was very good, but I really like to see what you were doing, and even though it is creating some waves, which I think the only way you make change is to create those waves and be strong and determined you're doing it for the right reason, to open up opera to other audiences, because as you know, Tamaki Makaurau has changed. It's not changing. We're not heading towards diversity like we are not the same country or city we were 10 years ago, 30 years ago, or even probably 5 years ago. So I think it's crucial for different art forms to change and attract different audiences. Because to be honest, sitting in that room, there was predominantly one audience, or potentially. So it's so crucial to make sure that you're broadening who comes to what you do, whether it's the free events or the paid events. So I know whether it's the unruly tourists or whether it's the other artistic direction you're taking New Zealand opera in, I think it's important that you're doing that, even though it might be creating some hard conversations between you and people who are connected with and really support the way you were doing things or currently are. So I just want to say that I can't imagine it's easy to have those conversations, but I think it's really, really important. So thank you.
Kia ora. Look, I just want to close by saying thank you very much. Again, I thought Marriage of Figaro was fantastic, outstanding, and I think the fact that the story was fun. You had people jumping out of windows and across the bedroom and hiding in the closet, and it made it a really entertaining opera, because there's obviously some very serious operas. Also on a personal journey, the opera in the park outgrew Dingledale. Although I must say I have had a few complaints from the neighbours of Dingledale who are able to sit at home and listen, and that no longer is the case. So I think Glover Park has been a fantastic next step to be able to take a bigger audience. I also want to congratulate you on the work that you did out at the Vodafone Event Centre. To have 47% of a different community come into experience opera, I think was an excellent thing to do, and maybe I would love to see that happening again, So huge congratulations for the work that you do. I might come and join Member Blair on stage, and see what we can rustle up. But congratulations, kia ora, and kati, thank you very much. Right, now we have the Stardome Observatory and Planetarium, Victoria Travers and Richard Sorensen. Morena, good morning.
Morena, thank you very much for having us here, and hello, Peter. Good to see you in a different venue. I enjoyed the New Zealand Opera presentation, and I actually loved singing, and I was in the chorus for the Star Navigator, so that was a special day. That really was down in the photo. Like previous presentation with New Zealand Opera, we're also undergoing some major changes, which I would like to outline. But first of all, I just want to start off with some of the highlights in the year, which was the appointment of our new Chief Executive, Victoria, and also fixing up a long-term lease arrangements with the Maunga Authority, and starting a very positive and long-term relationship with that group. So our lease is now very sound, which we're very happy about. So Victoria, if I could just pass over to you, please.
Sure. Well, ngā mihi nui ki ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohe e Tamaki Makaurau. Me mihi ki tika ngā mana whenua. Ka mihi ki councillors, Independent Statutory Board, ka mihi kia tātou. Ko pauwhakahaere ki te Stardome ahau, ko Victoria Travers, taka wingoa. It's my pleasure to be here, my first time here meeting with the council. So as Richard said, yes, it's been rather a year, rather 15 months, and as Nicola said prior to me, it was a great way to, in a strange way, to cement leadership with the first challenge being on the block of COVID-19. Thank you very much for having us here today. I'm very pleased to be able to update you on our organisation and our operations and how we've sort of navigated the last 15 months and, since COVID and prior to that as well. And also just a chance to acknowledge and thank the Council, the ratepayers of Auckland, and via the Amenities Funding Board for the vital funding that we get through the RAFA Act. The operational funding we receive, it makes up about 50% of our funding in any 1 year. Last year, it of course made up a little bit more than that because of the financial shock of COVID-19, and it was. Again, specifically, we'd like to thank the Council, the Mayor, and for the really swift and prudent decisions that were made to help us get through, and in particular, Anita Killeen with her leadership of the Funding Board. So probably just talk about some of our key highlights of the last period of time since we've reported. So as Richard has said, it was tremendous to come in as a new CEO and have our lease secured. The great thing about having a lease secured with the Tupuna Maunga Authority is that it's more than just a lease holder relationship. It's, as they represent mana whenua, it's a growing sign of their confidence in us, and we see, our role as lessees on the Maunga is to uphold the mana of Maunga Kia. We've been taking that we see that as a real a sort of north point for us in terms of its also driving some of our transformation, particularly towards improving our own bicultural practice and being able to uphold the mana of Maunga Kia. Making it through COVID-19 was obviously a pretty great highlight. Of the last period of time, it was 111 days that we were closed to operations and about 30 where we were on half capacity. We've also, over the last period of time, strengthened our relationship and deepened our relationships with knowledge holders and mātauranga Māori, mātauranga whetū. And this is a very exciting opportunity for us in the future as we come up. We've also upgraded our Zeiss telescope, which was terrific with the help of our volunteers. And, every major city in the world has a significant observatory and planetarium, and we're very proud that we get to play that role. Big highlight for us, it's a double-edged sword, but with visitation, our experience of COVID, nobody knew last year. It wasn't just the financial shock, it was how we dealt with the uncertainty that followed that. We're very pleased to report, and I believe this is the experience of many amenities and facilities. Our visitors came back with absolute gusto. We weren't sure how people would respond. It was also fortuitous that when we came out of the first lockdown, it coincided with Matariki. So Matariki, obviously our busiest time of the year, and so we made some changes to our Matariki program just to ground it a little bit more authentically, and that was led by our tangata whenua staff, and we were sold out, and we had to put on additional shows right the way through, and that's just and we'll be growing on that in the coming years. Also, social media has been fantastic for us. We've changed our approach with social media, and for any of you who are familiar with the kind of metrics that are used there, we've had some posts recently that have got nearly a million people engaging with them, and if anyone follows our Instagram, you'll see that we're just getting more and more engagement through that way. I was just going to talk a little bit, and probably Richard might contribute here, in terms of the wero that we've faced apart from the obvious one, over the last 12 months, and a little bit about how we're tackling them. So COVID-19, how did we negotiate it? Well, like all organisations, we had to make some very, very quick decisions, and there were some really material impacts that it had upon us. We had some redundancies that we had to make. We had some significant cost savings. It was the first thing we did, a reduction in our projected income, our self-generated, as well as a hold on the, prudently, there was a hold on we kept the funding, the RAFA funding at the same rate for the last financial year. We deferred any spending that wasn't necessary, and but that held up some of the development of our new programs. Going with that bit, sorry. The other wero that we have in front of us is we have an ageing building, we have ageing infrastructure. In order to stay relevant for our visitors, we really need to invest in that in the future. So obviously with the COVID kind of climate going on there, it'll be a challenge for us as we move through the upcoming few years. Our environmental impact, we see this as a major wero in front of us in terms of, we're in a climate emergency. What's our contribution to, in the way we operate, but also in the messaging we give out to the public. So that is something we're tackling very keenly and it's a big focus for us. And also ongoing, it's always about staying relevant for our visitors. A little bit about visitation in terms of how we return on the investment that Auckland makes in us. We very proudly, we're one of the few venues that's actually open for 14 hours a day every day. So it's quite interesting when, it's great that all these other facilities are open in the evening. We're open every single, six days a week. We're open in the evenings and we start in the mornings. Also very proudly, our visitation is primarily domestic, and then of that it is primarily Aucklanders, particularly when it comes to our education visitation. We really, really honour these visitors coming through our doors, and we put a lot of effort into manakiing them. Our future audience is that audience that comes through as tamariki, and in particular come through as school children. Between 50 and 60% of our visitation every year is school visitors. In terms of the, I'll probably talk a little bit, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Richard, but in terms of the major initiatives we have, I'll actually hand over to Richard because we've got a very important strategic opportunity.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're in the middle of our strategic plan, and the main outcome there has been a realisation that we needed true biculturalism in our facility, recognising Maori astronomy. So that is going to be a huge change that we're going to start working towards. And a general indigenisation of our organisation. So it's been a fascinating process. Our staff has been fully involved. I've noticed a real change in the way they think about things. And looking forward, we're hopeful that people are going to have a different experience when they walk in there. That makes it very clear that you're living at 37 degrees south, looking into a sky that's very different from anywhere else in the world, and a sky that was interpreted by Maori in a very different way, of course, from the way Western science interprets things. And I'm hopeful that we'll have a true and meaningful narrative about that experience. So thank you.
And just to build on Richard's words, yes, so obviously that was a very, very happy day last year when Matariki was announced as a miharo, a public holiday for us all from next year. So it is amazing, and we'll be building on, and we're doing a lot of work starting in September on new programs. As well as that, we want to be able to extend our program of Māori astronomy outside of just Matariki every year. It's really important, and as Richard said, the commitment to biculturalism and a bicultural understanding of the skies above us is really fundamental to our transformation. Māori astronomy should be available throughout the year, and which is why we're developing such great relationships with knowledge holders. So that's really significant, and moving through that. The other major thing in terms of our transformation, as I mentioned before, is really picking up the wero around the climate crisis and what our contribution is to the environment. So I'll leave it there and see if there's any questions.
Thank you very much. I'll have one question, Councillor Coombe.
Thank you. Tēnā koroa, thanks so much for the presentation. I have to admit, in my credentials as an Aucklander, the fact that I've never been to the Star Dome is very embarrassing. So I just want to I'd like to ask, would you be open to perhaps facilitating a tour for councillors who might like to attend and visit?
Oh, absolutely. We would love to manaki you all at Stardome. So, yes, I will set that up very quickly. Wonderful. It'd be great to have you.
Appreciated. I'm sure there's a few other councillors who would be happy to come along as well. Kia ora.
Kia ora. What I will say, though, if you are always struggling to find a present for someone who has got everything, a star is a great gift. So on that positive note, thank you very much for your presentation and thank you for what you do. And Matariki, of course, is right here, isn't it? So thank you. Right, now we have the Auckland Festival Trust, John Judge, David Inns and Vanessa Zigliani.
Good morning, thank you.
Morning, morena.
Morena. I'll start inevitably by thanking the Council and the Funding Board for their support. We have had a terribly disrupted last 2 years. I was at a party on the Saturday night just before the opening of the last festival, only to have everyone's phones go off with an alarm to say we're about to get locked down under COVID again in an attempt by some evil being to disrupt yet another festival. Luckily, you'll hear from David with a huge amount of work from the people who managed to put most things on, albeit on different days than we'd attended and sometimes in a different way. I think I would like to particularly acknowledge Anita Colleen's support during both the last two festivals. She has been absolutely excellent. You know, when I go and see her and say, I think we might be going to lose 1.8 million, or such thing when we go through. We like to give the really worst news before we come to the good news at the start. And she's been very helpful actually at helping us work through what was going on. And equally, I think the support, Desley, of you and the councillors to make sure that we can continue has been excellent, and we truly appreciate that. Luckily, in the 220 festival, we actually ended up with a slight surplus. I think when I sat down with Dave and Vanessa and went through their figures, and it looked like we would be losing a very large amount of money, with a combination of huge work by our own team, the emergency support we got, and eventually Creative New Zealand paying out a reasonable amount of money. We ended up with a slight surplus. Last year we handled it differently because we were concerned about what would happen, so we didn't commit particularly a lot of the advertising and programming money for a start, so that we had what we thought was hopefully never going to need to be used, a fund to deal with COVID. And a combination of that and the way we contracted with people means that we will have a surplus when we get to June this year. And in fact, we were aiming to rebuild our capital over a 3-year period. We'll be ahead of our targets at the end of the second year, which is, I think, a complete and utter miracle. Yes, it's a miracle. It's actually not a miracle. It's down to the work of these two people and the team we have, who are very good, along with many of our individual supporters putting their hands in their pockets to assist us with extra money to make sure that we come out the other side positively. What I'll do now is hand over to David, so that, David, you can comment in more detail on what's going on, and then we'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, John. Well, to acknowledge Shone McKellar, who's not with us today, our artistic director, who came in March 2020 to watch the festival shut down, and then programmed and delivered 21 in this COVID restricted environment. It's fair to say it's been a roller coaster ride over the last 15 months. The festival organisation and team, and a reasonably good financial, artistic and social space going forward for 22, so that's exciting. The 2020 festival was suddenly shut down just 8 days into a 19-day season, with staff working rapidly to get 320 international artists home and close down temporary venues. And despite the time pressures and the changing COVID levels, this was successfully achieved, with the last truck being picked up, containers picked up in the square 5 minutes before the official level 4 lockdown started. So I have to acknowledge the incredible team we have that put a festival together, not just internally, but the contractors that come and our venue partners and everyone else we work with in the city to, make that festival really part of Tamaki Makaurau. So we got past 2020, as John said, with a small operating surplus, and we sat at home and started planning and starting to shape what AAF 2021 could be. We did this in line with the Trust's risk management plan, taking into account the ongoing and changing COVID environment as best we could, and the fact that the borders were closed. So while opening the 2021 festival was delayed, as John mentioned, due to the lockdowns in February by 6 days, we did go on to stage what we believe is a successful 100% Aotearoa program under the theme of Aroha, which was a theme that we felt embraced the time that we were in, and a theme and a program which was a response to the fact that our borders were closed. Traditionally, we've had a 60% international program, 40% domestic. That's been roughly what the mix is. And of course, to go to 100% Aotearoa program was, it was the wrong word, but it was actually rewarding in many ways to see that breadth and wealth of artistry within this country, being able to put on what ended up being 84 events. Just going to put some images on the screen. This is not a PowerPoint as such, but this gives I guess reflects the depth, breadth, diversity and the reach of the 2021 festival with the 100% Aotearoa program. Despite being shut down for those first 6 days with the support of our artists, our venues and our audiences, we were able to reschedule 12 of the events into the latter part of the festival. Through this and extending the festival through to the 11th of April as opposed to finishing on the 24th of March as originally scheduled, we delivered 85% of the advertised and planned program. The program includes 7 world premieres, works in Te Reo Māori, Kapahaka, Pacifica Theatre, and 2 new works, Asian New Zealand works in dance and theatre. We planned a very extensive accessibility program and a strong education program. Sadly, the uptake in these did drop back after that first lockdown, but the seeds are set well to rebuild that again in 2022. In line with the organisational and programming strategy and Auckland Festival Trust's Māori language plan, Atahua Papa joined us in the programming team in August 2020 in a new permanent role of Kahatu Māori with responsibility for working with the artistic director and staff on commissioning, presenting Māori content within the overall festival program. And she's supported in this role by Inon Dalamere, who's our po tikanga, our external advisor in all things tikanga. The 21 festival, despite being 100% NZ and despite being focused back in, gave employment opportunities to over 1,000 artists, 150 support staff, our core team, as well as all the service industries around that, and everyone was remunerated as contracted. The Trust has had a long partnership basis to its business, and we continue to build strong partnerships with Auckland Theatre Company, Auckland Philharmonia, Auckland Live, Q Theatre, Summer Nova, which was a Auckland Unlimited product, the galleries, including Auckland Gallery, Te Tuhi and Te Uru, and to work with them to deliver what we saw as world-class work and maximise the resources across the sector. We also successfully developed new partnerships with organisations such as MOTAT and groups including the Migrant Mamas and the Polynesian Panthers, which saw a focus on their 50th year anniversary with the Dawn Raids Educate to Liberate exhibition at Studio One and the Panthers' large outdoor mural painted on the wall on the corner of Gundry Street. Alongside our local and national delivery, the festival continued to showcase many New Zealand work with the aim of selling shows from Aotearoa and especially Auckland onto Australian festivals and promoting work that features at the festival further afield internationally. So I've referred to some of the challenges, but just to highlight the ones we faced in this period, I guess the main challenge for a festival is that it happens in 3 weeks. It's in a specific window. So planning a large-scale event in a 3-week window in a COVID world did mean we had to plan with some flexibility to be able to move work. And while we lost 7 works that we didn't present, 2 of those are actually, I guess, in our store, ready to pop out again when the opportunity's right. Probably not in the festival, but working with another partner to put those up. And Jack and the Beanstalk's a prime example of that. while we presented an exceptionally strong lineup of artists from Aotearoa, we were unable to engage any international artists that do attract larger audiences and do drive quite a lot of our larger revenue streams. We received strong support from funders and individual givers, but faced challenges, I guess, from the corporate sector, especially the tourist and hospitality sector. We had to deal with the lack of flexibility in the Ticketmaster ticketing system. When you postpone a show, it's got to be re-entered before you can put it on sale again. So there's often a 7-day delay between cancelling and being able to sell that show again, and that's something we really need to look forward to solving. And probably the one that has the longer term effect for us is many of the technical and production staff that have supported this sector for a long time have moved to other areas of employment or moved into film. So there's a big space now for companies like the Festival, NZ Opera and Co. to rebuild that base, which is very core of technical and production expertise. We believe that the residents and ratepayers of Auckland benefited from the festival in many ways, even though they were truncated. We grew our Tamaki Makaurau footprint, 24 venues, shows in places including Waiheke Island, Takapuna, Manukau, Mangere, Warkworth and Glen Eden. We produced and presented an extremely strong Māori and Pacifica program of work, including work in Te Reo. We probably increased the mix of free and low-cost events given the climate at the time. We will follow a similar pattern for 22, building back into a more commercial proposition for 23. So looking forward, we definitely want to reintroduce international programming in 22, but in reality this will mostly come from Australia or through Australia, and Shona's just been in Melbourne for a slightly longer stay than she planned, looking at work with the Australian festivals that we can tour as a network, assuming our borders open internally, and also looking at works internationally that of a small scale that we can bring in quarantine in Australia and bring onto us. And the other thing we really need to do is plan and build large-scale works like the big Group Fs and the Carabosses that the festival's been famous for here at home, and that's sort of a 2 to 3 year strategy. So we're not reliant on, I guess, borders, we're not reliant on exorbitant freight and travel costs to bring those very big large-scale works in. Next festival will be the 10th to the 27th of March, hopefully intact in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to open for questions and I'll go first to Councillor Walker. Thank you.
Commendations first. I mean, remarkable and wonderful talent showcased. A couple of questions. I guess my interest is I would suggest that what you've done is a case study in pivoting and adapting to a very challenging environment. And as much and all as you've communicated some information to us in your report, I'm assuming that there's quite a bit of underlying information that will be relevant to the arts and culture sector around Auckland and probably New Zealand. So my question around that is how you're utilising that information and your experience in putting it out there as it goes to both yourself but also all of the groups and the like that companies that you've been engaging with.
Do you want to talk to the TRA special project?
Yes, so the TRA Special Project, thank you, is our new research project that we've been able to undertake with funding from Creative New Zealand, and looking at the behaviour of audiences wider than Auckland Arts Festival within the environment, COVID environment, and how we can react to that in a programming sense, in a presentation sense. So we've undertaken this project, as I said, not just looking at festival audiences, but looking at audiences that participate in the creative industries and the arts and cultural sector in Auckland as a whole. And we will be making that research available to our colleagues and peers once that is concluded, which is pretty soon. Actually, we're about to get their results from our TRA research agency. I think wider as regards to our COVID pivoting
strategy. I mean, we work as part of the whole wider landscape of Auckland and arts partners and our venues, and I think there's quite a large amount of sharing of knowledge and experience as we go forward with the experiences that we've had in the last 12 months.
Thank you. Look, with no further questions, I'd just like to thank you very much. You run an outstanding program, and it's been challenging times, as you've heard all the amenities say, but I know for you especially, and how you packed out that quickly and close to the wire was pretty amazing. So congratulations. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Members, that brings us to the end of our amenities presentations over the last 2 months, and I've also added a second... Pardon?
Sorry.
Okay. I'll move in a second. I've actually added a Chair's recommendation for the second one to thank the funding board themselves, because as we know, they are our conduit between us and the amenities for the outstanding work that they've done. And we've had a really tough year, as you're aware, and it's been a lot of extra work by the amenities board, so I'm sure that you will all join with me and thanking them as well. So I'll move, and Councillor Henderson will second. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you very much. To item 9, and that is a potential sale of 24 Upper Municipal Place in Onihanga. And I welcome to the table Anthony Lewis. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Apologies, Richard Taylor, our Priority Location Director for the Isthmus, is on his way from another meeting, so he may turn up halfway through, so I'll forward his apologies.
You will do admirably, Anthony.
Good morning. Eki Panuku is recommending the disposal of 24 Upper Municipal Place in Omnihanga. The sale of this property will contribute to key strategic outcomes identified in the Transform Omnihanga High Level Project Plan. As you will see on page 15, it's quite an unusual horseshoe-shaped property. It's no longer required for water infrastructure purposes. Council has held on to it since 2010. There is an adjacent property, number 26, which was a water care property. There was a well located in that property. Since water care disposed of that property, obviously number 24 is no longer required. Sales proceeds will be allocated towards the Eki Panuku Transform Unlock budget, which can contribute to public good outcomes for Transform Omnihanga. Eki Panuku is recommending disposal to the adjoining landowner, who's also actually the leaseholder. They're seeking to acquire it as part of their development of the adjacent Onihanga Working Men's Club. They own all the land in that block, including the former water care site at number 26. Obviously, if it's approved for disposal, we are seeking to enter into exclusive negotiations with this landowner. This will provide better urban design outcomes for the area and allows us to negotiate a price based on the value of the property, what it would contribute to their development, rather than just a square meterage price for the site as a standalone. We've undertaken consultation with the wider council group and the Mangakiki Tamaki local board. Feedback received is supportive of the proposed disposal. We have been talking to mana whenua since 2016 regarding the wider Transform Onihanga work. Because this property wasn't included earlier on, we've undertaken further consultation with mana whenua group, and we spoke to 19 iwi entities. The consultation did outline that due to the size and configuration, we are seeking to dispose to the adjoining landowners, so there's no commercial opportunities to acquire it. In response, we received one notification of cultural significance from one iwi entity. We have been talking to them ever since, including most recently as last week. They've outlined that they have no commercial interest, and beyond noting their cultural significance notification in the decision-making process, they're happy with the property going forward for a disposal. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Anthony. I'm happy to move with Josephine not being here as her neighbour. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Fapaina? Thank you. Now I'll open for questions. Supported by the local board. Councillor Member Blair.
Yes, so what was the issue with the runanga of Ngāti Whātua? Were they... I'm just trying to peel that back a little bit more.
Yes, through the Chair. So they responded with the same response for 6 other properties we sent out for consultation. We have spoken, including outlining what are the interests, if they are significant, how can we recognise them, do they want the information put onto mana whenua management layer that the Council's Maori Heritage team are running. The response back was mainly that they're not interested commercially, they just wanted it noted that yes, it is of an interest, probably linked back to where the well was located, being a source of fresh water, but no further information has been forthcoming. They're just happy for it to be noted in a report.
Yeah, because my understanding is that the Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei would have a stronger interest in that place, but they didn't register anything?
No response was received back from Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Well, it's been moved and seconded. I'll put it to the vote then. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We move now to, thank you, Anthony. We move now to our emergency budget update for June, and welcome Tracy and Pramod.
That's great. Good morning through you, Madam Chair. So as you've pointed out, this is Tracy and I are here to present the latest emergency budget update, which covers the period up till the end of May. Before we kick off, I'll just like to introduce Tracy Zhu, who's a senior analyst in my team, and she'll be providing the update for this month.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, Pramod. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tracy from the Group Financial Planning team, and I'll taking you through the update covering the May period, 2021. Sorry. Yeah, so included in this month's update is our usual group performance dashboard, which provides an indication as to how we are performing against our revenue, expenditure, capex, as well as some of the key financial metrics, such as SSLs and savings. So as we reported on last month, we successfully achieved the 120 million savings target. Therefore, no further update has been included in this report. Consistent with the previous updates we provided, up to end of May, our group financial performance continuously tracked favourably to the emergency budget. Direct revenue remains favourable. This is mainly due to the higher revenue earned in regulatory and water care. Direct expenditure is also tracking favourably to budget. This is partly due to the delays in project, as well as just general effective cost management across the group. Capital expenditure is currently tracking below budget, and it is currently forecast that the full-year delivery for the group is around 90%. In-flight projects not to be delivered, forecast not to be delivered in this financial year, will be carried into the next financial year for completion. As for asset recycling, we've previously updated that the full target of 244 million will not be achieved in the current financial year. Despite the lower cash receipt from SSLs, the year-end financial position is still forecast to be better than the emergency budget projections. This is due to the favourable revenue performance, as well as lower capital expenditure that I just described. This more favourable financial position provides a strong buffer against possible future shocks, especially considering the high degree of uncertainty surrounding the long-term revenue projections. So this is the end of the presentation. Pramod and I are happy to take questions. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So just to remind you, even though this is the June meeting, these are the results for the end of May, not end of year. I'm going to kick off with the first question to our Chief Financial Officer. Peter, even though we have met the budget target of 120 million for efficiencies and savings, could you please confirm that you are still looking to find further efficiencies and savings and not just stopping because budget has been reached?
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair. Honestly, we always continue to look for efficiencies, and the phrase used within the report there was effective cost management. Our next financial year is starting in around 14 days, and we're committed within the recovery budget to achieving $90 million of savings and cost reductions within that year. So it would not make sense for us to actually take the foot off the pedal and not continue to look for savings, particularly to the extent that they're sustainable and ongoing. The extent to which we have further cost reductions over and above what has been signalled in May will come through in the year-end report as well.
Thank you very much. Couldn't help but answer that question. Any other questions? Councillor Henderson.
Yes, just about asset recycling. I wonder if we could just maybe get into a little bit more detail in terms of where we're at and where we're expecting to be.
I can see Ross moving. Ross has stood up. So
I should have let you know I was going to ask that, actually. Sorry.
I'll let Ross answer.
Yeah, through the chair. Yes, Ross was moving. His ears pricked up. Yeah. Good morning, councillors. So yes, we will not meet the target for asset recycling in the current financial year. But what we're saying is actually when we look at the first 3 years of the recovery budget and the current emergency budget, over those 4 years, we're still comfortable we will get there, but the timing of the cash flows will be different. If we go back to the emergency budget, the asset recycling was split into two big areas: property and then the car park concessions. We have done a lot of work on the car park concessions, and we're looking to come and discuss with this committee sometime in the near future, although we wanted to complete the discussions around downtown car park first, given the nature of that opportunity. So, and downtown car parks, a new opportunity we have added in, which is going to contribute significantly into the next financial year or the following financial year. So we're comfortable over time, but just the timing, it was difficult to forecast.
All right. Yeah. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have an amount as to what could be favourable at the end of the emergency budget year?
In terms of revenue projections, and I think we've indicated this as part of our LTP workshops and the mayoral proposal as well, we had projected a revenue loss of around 450 million for this current year. The most recent projections are that that is likely to be about 250 million better than what was projected nearly 9-10 months ago. And that's, as Tracy pointed out, a large part of that is due to the regulatory revenue and IGC revenue from Watercare being much better than expected. And another significant part of that is the Waka Kotahi top-up of public transport revenue of around 130 million funding from them to support that piece as well.
Thank you. Supplementary Chair, look, I'm still getting calls, and I have no doubt that councillors and members of this committee are getting calls around the pressure still being applied to our staff that are currently employed. So this may be a question that we will end up discussing through a workshop instead of paying off debt, is to have a look at really reducing the work that our staff, and that's something that may come back hopefully through the CEO to either this committee or a workshop around doing that instead of paying down debt. So look, that may be a political discussion, but I'm just saying that at what stage will we have that discussion in regards to it. So I'll put that to it.
Thank you. I'll ask our CFO to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. With your permission, I'll take that back to the CEO and work through the appropriate forum for that, which is likely to be a workshop and perhaps APR as well. And balancing of workload and well-being is, of course, something that the council is looking to be an exemplar in. We want to lead in that wellness space, so it's a point that is not lost on us.
Yeah, that's the reason I asked, and I know His Worship the Mayor's also has a comment, but Chair, that also flies in regards to what Councillor Hills has always advocated for during the discussions of this long-term plan around our debt ceiling, and using that to end up sort of easing the pressure and everything else. So look, I just wanted to sort of table that because of the calls I'm getting. I have no doubt at all, like I said, Richard will be getting the same ones as well as others.
Yeah, I might just comment on that additional aspect of that. The degree to which the funding is available for the workforce is different from the debt ceiling. We shouldn't, in most cases, be using our debt to fund operational costs and aspects.
Yeah, just to clarify that, Peter, I wasn't implying that.
Okay, thank you.
What I was implying was that if we can alleviate the pressures that are on our staff currently as a result of the emergency budget, plus this recovery budget in the first 3 years, albeit the 5% that we will have one-off in the first year, is the reason why I'm mentioning this, and a discussion needs to be had at a political level. Kia ora.
Your Worship, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of points. Firstly, APR did look at the question of staff numbers for the forthcoming year, and it will be reporting back to the governing body in the near future on that. And clearly there will be some staffing adjustments. So things like the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, which is we're bound to because it's government policy, will require more staff to carry out that function. Climate change is another area, obviously. Our increased capital program will require more staff. And at the same time, we're being careful in how we spend that money. And while we've got that 250 million favourable this year, I think we've had the discussion many times over about the need to continue to have a buffer because we just don't know what's around the corner. We're in day 110 of being COVID-free. Fantastic news, but I can't tell you tomorrow we won't have a community outbreak and a lockdown. And that's the sort of world we live in. And so we need to err on the side of caution. And Councillor, I know that you appreciate that.
But I'll still be pushing for staff, Your Worship, just to have the last say, hopefully, but I'll still be pushing for to alleviate the pressures on our staff as a result of the emergency budget and the recovery budget, and that's the key issue for me. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Councillor Coon? No. Councillor Cooper?
Thank you. It was just a follow-up on the comments about your comments about we're still looking for savings even though we've looked at, met the targets. I suppose my question is, given we've had the comment here that we've still got to be careful around future shocks and we're already struggling with staffing and employing people and we do need more people, is your comment, are you meaning that we should just keep going and saving money? Because I'm worried that doing that might mean we can't employ the people we need. We've got several departments that
Just want to
are
reiterate
struggling.
what our CFO said, and that is that the efficiencies and savings that we continue to find actually form the basis of the first year of the 90 million, all right? So it's not as if we're
Of the next year, of this next financial year.
I mean, that's what it's leading towards. You know, the whole 120 million, as we know, some have been one-offs, some have been things that we will never do again. Some have been things that will go.
Roll in.
And the extra, whilst it looks good for this year, the advantage will be start at a higher level for year one.
I know it's a comment, but I won't comment later. My concern is everybody says, oh, look, you know, we're saving all this, but we still need to carry on with our asset sale program because we can't put a lot more pressure on our debt. So
no, we get that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hills.
Thank you. Where was the debt to revenue sitting, do we know, at this point? Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I didn't know if I spoke through you.
So as we reported in the last month when we did the quarterly performance report update, the projections are that year end it will be around 270% or just below.
Thank you. And I know this is symptomatic every budget and it's not anyone's particular fault around the capital program. How can we, how far are we behind, and will we expect we're behind by end of year? Can you tell that at the moment?
So current indications are that actually at the end of May we were tracking about 95% of budget, so it's a little bit up on the previous month, and a little bit of that is with water care. They're making really good progress with the drought-related investment that they're making. Indications from other CCOs are between 90 to 95 as well. So there's a few things like land acquisitions and things like that if they do go through, then we might be a bit higher than 90, maybe closer to the 95, but we just have to wait and see for the next couple of weeks and see what the final result is. 90% on a 2.6 billion program for this year, given the COVID disruptions, though, I would say is still a pretty good result.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. The question I have, and it might not be for finance, is just how do we ensure, because we have so much plan in the renewals space as well as capital, how can we ensure that next year that there are a few things waiting in the wings maybe to be picked up if things get delayed or we can't do stuff? Because I know I keep going on about the debt ceiling, but at least trying to get, is it local projects in or something? I would just hate to be under by, a couple $100 million or something like that. But it doesn't sound like it's going to be that large. But I just want to know how we can ensure that there's always a pipeline in the window with maybe some of our contracts that have more program or things like that.
With respect, I think that's a Jim question, and I know that's one thing that he has on his list of things that he needs to do. So maybe he'll just have a quick chat with him. But I know that he's agreed to the delivery of the program, so he must have confidence that it's able to happen.
And just brief comment, Madam Chair, I won't speak in the main. Just want to back up what Councillor Filipaina, Councillor Cooper and others have said. I think we just need to be careful when we do, I know we're speaking, around the table to different audiences, but when we say keep pushing on that 120 even though we've completed it, and I know that's been explained, but that does raise up the ears of staff, and when we know we are losing a number of staff to Kāinga Ora and other government agencies because they can pay more, and we know that we are losing staff to private, especially in the consenting space and other areas because they can pay more and have better, potentially, other working conditions. I would just hate that we send a message through staff again that we're looking for more savings, and in their mind that could be staff or the lack of pay rise or things like that. So just making sure that we explain to staff what that is rather than just always celebrating the savings, because that can send a lot of nervousness if people think, well, this is, what's happening this year.
I think you'll find the end of year report will have all that information on it for you. Okay, give you confidence around that. Right, any comments around? Yes, Councillor Watson.
Just a final question on point 4 to do with the greater the revenue loss essentially not being as much as expected. I wonder if you could just explain to me in terms of that regulatory revenue and consenting volumes. I thought it always kind of operated on basically a cost recovery mode. Am I to read from that there's a kind of charge on top of that, or revenue on top of the cost of employing people, especially if they're consultants?
Through you, Chair, that's correct. I think it is noted in the dashboard as well. There is an indicator in the dashboard that the costs for regulatory are unfavourable to budget, which aligns with the cost recovery model that's operated. So higher costs, higher revenue, but there's also higher costs for regulatory services as well.
And just in terms of, and I'm thinking particularly of the building industry, where we have standard charges for inspections and things like that. Now, are those charges largely based on cost recovery too, or is there another element that's added to that?
Councillor, I might have to come back to you on that one specifically.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Is that okay, Councillor? Yeah. So the regulatory rate basically evens itself out. Any comments? Well, I'll move then the recommendation that we receive our update, seconded by Deputy Chair. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. Right, now we go to item 11, which is exploring alternate funding and financing opportunities, which is something that we should have agreed that we should always do. And now we have a wonderful approach to that, and I welcome to the table Nancy, Michael and Fiona. Welcome. Who's going to lead off?
So, kia ora all. Just to introduce, with me today I've got Fiona from our Development Program Office, who we're working really closely with in this project, and Nancy Liu from my team. Just like to introduce her, and she'll be presenting the report today.
Thank you, and good morning everyone. This report seeks your support for our continuous exploration of opportunities to accelerate investment in growth infrastructure, particularly on the use of the Infrastructure Funding and Financing Act. Auckland Council's 10-year budget agreed on the 25th of May provides infrastructure investment to support housing and urban development in key growth areas. However, it also notes from our work done on the housing growth infrastructure lane of the budget that a council cannot afford to fund all of the infrastructure required to achieve the desired levels of growth. Although our other funding mechanisms such as the developer mitigation and development contributions can fund the infrastructure to some extent, it is apparent that there is a significant funding and financing gap that will lead to delays in delivering infrastructure to meet the growth demands in housing and employment in Auckland. So given the Council's current capital and operating constraints, staff have been exploring alternative funding and financing options, especially on the opportunities that the Infrastructure Funding and Financing Act 2020 may potentially provide as a new tool in the funding toolbox. This Act itself is complex and new, so we are working closely with the several government departments as a working group, including the Crown Infrastructure Partners, Treasury, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. We believe it is better to involve the various government departments early on, and it is especially beneficial for the initial works and pilot projects. As a working group, we work closely to better understand the interpretation of this Act, the selection of potential projects, the review and analysis of these projects, and to finally recommend a pilot project for you to review and decision-making. Under this Act, special purpose vehicles could be created for each funded project to raise finance for the infrastructure through collection of multi-year levies to repay the finance raised. The levy amount, term, payer, and what we called as project beneficiaries would be presented and eventually agreed by Cabinet. On completion of the project, these assets will be vested in the Council. We know that there are several projects that can be funded through the mechanism prescribed by the Act. We have commenced the detailed analysis work, and later in the year we will report to the committee with a number of options for the pilot scheme and a recommendation at the appropriate times. This work will enable us to have a process in place, working with the Crown for an infrastructure funding and financing application that the councillors will endorse to support growth. While we focus on investigating funding opportunities through the Infrastructure Funding and Financing Act, we will not disregard other opportunities in the meantime. We will continue to assess individual initiatives with the oversight from senior management and steering groups, and would then be presented to and considered by you before we undertake substantial work for a formal proposal. As the use of the infrastructure funding and financing tool is only one tool in the finance toolbox, we will also consider other options, such as using additional debt within the 290% limit, or even debt beyond our agreed limits, or sale of assets or additional revenue streams through higher rates or development contributions. So we have presented today seeking your support to our continuous exploration of opportunities, particularly on the using of the Act to enable growth infrastructure. We will continue to work with multiple partners on various projects and in different locations, and we will present to you on our analysis and proposal in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. My first question comes from Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for not being able to be there in person today, and thank you for the opportunity to Skype in. I have two questions. One of them is around the work that's being done at the moment with the working group. I was thinking about the opportunity for governors to be not involved in the working group, but to be carried along that journey for future direction setting and decision making on growth and on funding growth. When you have an opportunity to understand how these decisions or what has happened along the way, sometimes it makes decision making a lot more efficient. So are there any governors, councillors at the moment involved in that piece of work?
So through the chair, this working group sits underneath the joint work program on housing and growth, which we have with central government, and sitting on that party are the mayor and deputy mayor and I think the chair of planning. And so that's the governance oversight of this work program. And additionally, as Nancy mentioned, we'll be coming back to you with any options that are generated and reporting back through this body for any further decisions.
Thank you. So the answer would be just to request a briefing if we wanted more information.
Yeah,
Yes,
and that would be okay. Great.
Thank you. My second question, Chair, is around the plan changes for Drury, and I don't know if you can answer this question. What influence does the fact that there won't be anything in terms of a funding model through the IFF when those plan changes are being heard to compromise the future growth or to compromise the outcome of the decision by the commissioners on the plan changes?
Through the chair. Difficult to say because it's a situation that requires us to wait and see how other people interpret legislation. We are presenting evidence in plan changes around our funding status and with regard to what infrastructure is available there. But it's really hard to answer that question. There's a lot of variables and not really, I wouldn't want to preempt how it is taken into account.
Thank you for your answer.
Just to add to that, I think that what we are saying today here just reconfirms what we've said through many fora over time, including through directly in our LTP, is that we don't currently have the funding and financing to deliver all the infrastructure we know is needed at this time, and that what we are doing is continuing to work to find ways to increase or accelerate that level of investment.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Second question, Councillor Newman.
Good morning, and actually Councillor Dalton's question largely makes my question redundant because I too had a query as to what we are telling the commissioners at the time with respect to the plan changes, noting that we don't have the funding model in place developed for Drury. Also too now the situation Drury is made worse by the recent decisions announced by government around Mill Road. So I'm just wanting to understand, you've identified within the scope of this paper the discussion in Drury and the option for Drury being a pilot for an IFF opportunity, but the scope of the model that you're proposing here, I mean, how far developed is this? Because it just seems to me to be, I can understand the concept, but frankly, the revised scope of what the funding package would need to look like under this opportunity seems to be changing dramatically. It will have to become more and more and more expensive to reflect the infrastructure needs and gaps in that location, which will of course impact in terms of future housing cost, which is fine if that's what's required. But what's the timing for this? Where is that information?
Through the chair, you're correct. It is a changing landscape with regards to the amount of infrastructure funding required. That is why we have put that working group together. The legislation is very broad and wide-reaching, and it allows us to interpret it very widely. It needs some guidance notes as to how Crown wishes us to
address and apply through those scenario breaking. And it also, once we've got those scenarios together, it will need some councillor guidance, which is relevant to the question that was asked earlier about if there are opportunities along the way where we need some guidance on your opinions. We will bring it to you. It's not that advanced. We have commenced the process, hence wanting to come back to you towards the end of the year. There's a lot of discussion required with Crown and education around the complexity of the application. Does that answer the question, Chair?
Well, could I ask, is any of this information forming the basis of our planning response to those plan change applications?
So our planning response is to provide evidence of the infrastructure funding and financing position. The exercise that we're going on is to try and find alternative finance to fund the gaps that are identified. Did that answer your question?
It's a question for planning chair, but I presume the answer to my question is that we are telling the commissioners that the gaps are massive, that the funding instruments are not in place to address that, and we are trying with some difficulty to try and find a way to figure a way out to try and get through this. In the meantime, we have some real problems with the plan change applications. Would that be fair? Probably not for these people to answer, but I presume that's the answer.
I'll take that as a comment because it's rhetorical potentially, but yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, team, for the work. The IFS is an opportunity, but it's not the whole solution. It never can be. Everyone understands that. I want to know how your work has been impacted by the consenting fast track legislation that's called back to the Minister and has sent a commission that does potentially bring us some uncoordinated and out of sequence developments. That could be quite a spanner in the works, I would presume, if it goes through and passed.
I suppose the key to the work we're doing is, it's a initially very big picture view of the requirements for the whole area and across multiple different infrastructure types, and seeing if we can solve any pieces of that puzzle using this tool. And as you've identified, it's a new tool, and it's really productive that we're working with Treasury, MHUD, CIP to find a way to use that tool to accelerate our investment, because as you all know through the LTP work, there's only so much investment we can make with current funding models, and so looking to advance it. Details around specific consenting issues and fast track, we haven't got quite into those as yet, but we feel we're making good progress.
All right, Deputy. Progress, I think progress is really looking, not good progress. Councillor Walker.
I've got a couple of questions. We've got this national policy statement on urban development looming. I would expect that will create enhancement in value of the order of billions within those areas. I'm assuming that there's some work being done on estimating what that value uplift is, and I'm assuming that there's some effort around how we might capture some of that, because otherwise that value uplift is lost to us. And yes, it's been driven by government, but we're party to that. As it stands now, we've already lost value uplift through the unitary plan process and through other plan changes. So are we actively looking at that and engaging with government around opportunities?
So through the chair, there's been a lot of work done by officers over value capture opportunities over the years. This particular project is around looking at the IFF tool and how we can use that. And the IFF tool, like DC's, is a cost recovery mechanism rather than necessarily a value capture mechanism. Now, it can be seen to have some of the characteristics of a value capture mechanism, but at its heart, it's a cost recovery tool, and decisions around it need to be made in that light.
Thank you.
Just further to this, these sorts of tools are widely used in other jurisdictions. In France, for example, things are done on a much more voluntary basis. In London, Crossrail and the like, the circumstances is different. It would be really useful for us to be informing ourselves on various tools that might be available. Some of them may be more voluntary, for example, so that we can actually make this stuff happen. Otherwise, my real concern is that value uplift will go to essentially the private sector. The opportunity will be lost. It's immense. So I'm just putting that on the table. The other question I've got just goes to the application of what you're doing to case studies. I clocked in quite a significant amount of effort trying to unlock a location associated with Cooley Ave in Silverdale. I'd put that up as a case study. Here is an instance where you've got an area that's in incredibly close proximity to a bus station, incredibly market attractive, a potential very quickly to produce commercial intensification, but also apartments and the like, of some scale. I just found, trying to work through that, great difficulties working with New Zealand Transport. Some parts of council were more accommodating, but it was very, very difficult generating any kind of integrative approach, trying to tap into some sort of facility that might avail of the development contributions that were going to be arising from that area. And frankly, in terms of infrastructure, quite modest infrastructure requirements, and all of this across a background where there were just 3 property owners. One of them could actually build the infrastructure. So this is a case study where almost all of the planets were in alignment, and we still can't pull anything off. Whether or not the National Policy Statement on Urban Development will go some way to rectifying that, I don't know, but it would be very useful to have a case study approach, and I'd certainly put that up as a location that's incredibly market attractive.
Okay, take that on board.
Sorry, point of order, Chair. Are we in questions and comment or just question?
I think the councillors used the time to have both question and comment.
Okay, cool. Just because I'm coming up, so I want to know.
You're next.
If there is a response, it'd be welcome. So I'm asking a question around the possibility of having case studies, because that's one of the best ways to actually...
So this paper talks about us using Drury as a key case study, and it is our key case study. We've got a lot of, paper details a number of reasons why we've used that one, and particularly the high level of engagement from central government is a key factor there. We're not saying no to other opportunities, and we're looking at other ones as they come up, and we can have a look at that particular one and see how it might fit into the scheme.
Thank you. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, paragraph 32. Why aren't we looking at the northwest?
Through the Chair, we are actually doing preparation and investigation work that is going on through the same period before we come back and report again on the case study. The idea of doing the case study where we chose is because it's the most complex environment, probably will cover off most of the things that we need to arrange between questions and decisions for councillors and Crown. And hoping that we will be ready off the back of the Supporting Growth Alliance detailed business cases and all the other information we're gathering in that period to be able to use it as one of the applications or present it to you as an application.
Great, that's really wonderful. I really appreciate that work. I just very briefly urge that we keep in mind the timing of the Northwest and try and get there as quick as we can. I mean, a lot of the infrastructure we're trying to fund actually is already needed by the existing population, never mind the ones that are coming in. And so the timing really is critical. But at the same time, yeah, we need houses wherever we can get them. And I do support Drury to be that case study. So thank you very much. Well done.
Yeah, you're so true. Thank you. Councillor Young.
Yes, with our current financial constraints, I definitely support trying any new tools that may help us unlock funding to get our city moving, as well as infrastructure to supporting the greenfield housing. Are we also looking with government how we might use this act to deliver bigger transport infrastructure purchase? Like, for example, spin up the delivery of our rapid transit network. The benefit from the higher density housing growth that this could allow would be high, particularly in light of the recent national policy statement on the urban development. Thank you.
Yes, so the IFF Act, anybody can make an application for any type of infrastructure, including the land element. That was part of the negotiations when we were drafting the Act, is part of the learnings that they took from that. I think we just need to work with Crown to get the first one off the ranks, and then see, we will understand at the end of this exercise how flexible and how much we may want to use this and bring that to the table for you.
Yeah, good answer. That's right. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It might not be for this paper, but I think in general, the issue is the issue that we just shouldn't be building in all these areas because of the issues we have. And I guess the flow and effect, you know, even with these solutions or potential solutions, how do they affect the operating costs? Because we, for instance, Milldale, yep, few solutions for roads and pipes, but there's no public transport there at all, and there's no public transport planned, and we don't have funding to do that. So I guess my concern is this really, we're trying to put a tool over something that maybe we shouldn't be doing in the first place?
So it's exactly why we're working on this with our colleagues from, not just from DPO, but from across the organisation. What we want to do is bring together some options, come back to you, and then you say, look, to deliver this infrastructure, this is the sort of prices you're looking at. And also at that time, you know, then when we've got actual packages together, we can look at other issues such as ongoing operating costs, such as climate impacts. Those sort of things will be things we'll need to look at, but only once we've actually got some options there. Once we've done that detailed analysis of what the infrastructure requirements are, and what phasings could be, or in order to deliver that infrastructure. So, but it definitely, once, you know, at this stage, what we're saying is we want to go ahead and do that, looking at options. But once they come back to you, then that's when the real prices are clear and the real cost of that infrastructure becomes clear, and that's when other ongoing costs, etc., become real.
Thank you. Councillor Darby. Oh, sorry, did you want to say?
Yes, if I may, through the chair, we are very cognisant of the potential impacts of OPEX, and we have started working with the council group in trying to form what that may look like. So it's not forgotten, and it is an important part of the growth outcomes. I agree with you.
And just brief question. Thank you for those answers. I guess for me, will what is being done give us the true cost? Because often we go, look, affordable housing, $600,000 or $700,000, but we've added $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to a person's rate bill as a what are they called? The vehicle that, you know, because we have only collected $25,000 in DCs when we could have collected 125, etc. So yeah, I guess I just want to see the full cost of what we're really showing people. And you know, you might buy a house and say hooray, and then realise that you've got to pay $6,000 or something every year for the rest of your
Exactly, through the chair. We're very cognisant that it's a jigsaw puzzle of costs. Somebody has to pay. There's only a few ways that we can make it happen. The whole point of the case study is so that we can give you those scenarios for debate and for decision making.
Yeah. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Just at the outset, I did email on this, probably a question for you, Peter, regarding the Crown Infrastructure Partners approach that we were part of at Milldale. When are we going to see a report as to the status of that and to understand the success or otherwise of that infrastructure and funding financing package?
Shall I carry on? Through the chair, if I may, my team is doing the monitoring with Crown Infrastructure Partners on that, and I can make it a task to bring that to your next meeting if that's what you wish. Tell me how regularly you would like an update.
Well, I think it is critical because we're embarking on another body of work around infrastructure and funding and financing, and we don't know how the last one landed and worked. There's a project list for Milldale, a very clear project list, and there is concern that that project list is not being delivered. So I think we need to reflect on what we've done and understand that, not to necessarily stop progressing this work, but actually we too often make decisions and we don't have, post-event reports or post-implementation reports. And it's pretty fundamental that we need to understand that. So that's a gap for me at the moment. If it is a future report, let's see that. Which takes me to this report, which generally I'm supportive of, and I'll just go to the motion because the motion doesn't really give much direction other than it acknowledges the report, but the report is actually a bit more prescriptive because it narrows down onto Drury. Not disagreeing with that entirely, but if you look at paragraph 19, you're referring to various options, and you talk about Northwest Drury, etc. And then paragraph 31 narrows down onto Drury and other projects, and then it goes on to say with a focus on Drury, and then we have there's further mention there of adopting the recommended approach, but there is no motion, there's no recommendation here to adopt the recommended approach. So I think that needs a bit of a tidy up if there is a recommended approach. But I would suggest, and my question is, Chair, is the recommended approach has a greenfields focus. Now, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Cooper, I'm sure they're concerned about what's already got out of the blocks on Greenfield, which is that northwest deficit. I would probably say on the joint government council housing and growth program, we already know we've got massive deficits in brownfields areas, Tāmaki, Roskill, they're the big ones. So my question is, if we're going to do a pilot on a green in Drury, why can't we also do a pilot at the same time on a brownfields example, say Tāmaki, so that we can get a read and compare notes on green and brown, at least?
So through the chair, we do continue to do a whole lot of work with government partners on the Auckland Housing Program, and we're meeting with Fiona's team and my team, dealing with them regularly, and trying to find ways through to support and deliver infrastructure quicker in areas such as Tāmaki, such as Mount Albert and Mount Roskill, Mangere and Northcote and Oranga. So looking in those areas, we are doing a lot of work. For this specific tool, what we felt was that the Drury option was the best option to start looking at how a levy, for example, is charged, and that looking at a greenfield option first was what we thought was the best option. We've got a lot of engagement on IFF for Drury with central government, and so that enables us to get that work done.
early and at lower cost. And so that's why we've taken the Drury case down the IFF lane first, but that does not mean that there's any slowing up on work on the other growth areas, as Fiona's already mentioned, with respect to the Northwest and our ongoing work with both Kaingaora and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development on the Auckland Housing Programme.
Okay, Chair, so it's going to be critical that we don't lose sight of those other areas. So I'm just wondering how that motion needs to read then. I think we do need to acknowledge in that motion that we are progressing with we're adopting the recommended approach, which is Drury as a priority, and I'll leave up the words to you and Peter and others.
Think, yeah, okay.
But to word it in such a way that it's not concluding at Drury.
Yeah.
So we've used the word pilot. I don't know if that helps there, and that there are other opportunities that we'll continue to look at.
I'll just wait and I'll send you a note. All right?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Goff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I took it from your earlier comment. We can make a comment as well as ask a question. I'm going to combine the two, with your permission. I support the recommendation because it says that we need to keep exploring the IFF Act, and we clearly have to do that. What worries me is para 33, because that seems to run contrary to the decisions we've just made in the long-term plan. In the long-term plan, we set our debt limits. We said we made a choice not to put a strategic asset sale into it, and we made a decision that we weren't going to increase rates beyond what we have set out. And 33, as I read it, looks a bit like a Trojan horse that's throwing all those issues back on the table. And you want to put those on the table, you do it through an annual plan or you do it through a long-term plan. You don't feed it in through the back door. So I don't know whether I want to... I've registered what I believe about that. I think that's probably where the majority, well, it was with the majority view because we just supported a long-term plan. So we don't support a long-term plan and then put in another paper that maybe will increase the rates a bit more, or maybe we'll sell the strategic assets, or maybe we'll borrow more than we were going to. If you want to raise those issues, please raise them in the appropriate place, which is not this paper. So that's my statement. I'm pretty clear on it. I'll get Peter to comment on it. Maybe before I ask my questions, you'd like to comment on that, Peter?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. With the paper, as part of the balance sheet optimisation, it has focused on the IFF. Within the IFF, those are, as we've described them, potential options over a bigger time frame, and potentially include those other aspects. But as you've quite rightly pointed out, the recovery budget has already determined that those items that are in there have already been determined within the recovery budget. So within the frame of the pilot, they're not aspects for consideration. What they set is the frame within which we will be looking at the IFF.
Thank you. I think that's important to have on record here in case at some future time say, but will you pass this paper saying we needed to look at that? Obviously, there's nothing to stop anyone looking at that in the future, but it needs to be done in the appropriate context, and obviously it would have to be consulted on, so it's not appropriate to take it further on this paper. My questions are a bit more straightforward. I've looked at section 55 on the pilot, but I'm not sure yet when you estimate we might be able to commence the pilot in Drury. Could I maybe get some clarification from one of our officers at the front table? I don't know whether it's which one of you want to answer that one.
Through the chair, that's the January to March. We're hoping to have the investigations concluded to come back to you with the paper. Obviously, we then need to get your input before we can actually finalise the way that we might do an application for an IFF policy, because what Crown wants through the exercise that we're doing and maybe what the councillors want us and the way you want us to apply might be very different. So we're hoping that it will be January to March if all the policies, processes, applications and everything's agreed is in place.
Thank you. A brief comment on that is I think it's essential that we do it in this. I'm listening to what Councillor Darby is saying, but We know from the work that you've already done that brownfields is more complex. We haven't actually had any pilot for the IFF yet, so let's start with an area that doesn't quite have the same complexities that we've got in the brownfields area. It doesn't mean to say we can't move to the brownfields later on. The second thing, and this would have to be very high level, but if we brought in an IFF that looked at an IFF charge of probably $1,000 to $1,500 a year, which I think was the range that you were looking at, can you give us a high-level estimate of, I know there's lots of qualifications needed on it, but how much money you might be able to raise through that revenue source backing a higher borrowing capacity? What sort of dollars are we potentially looking at?
So the historical ways that we looked at that, it was hundreds of millions, and depends on who you actually charge and what you actually charge them. And there's some national and local political decision making to be made there before we can determine that.
Okay, so we're talking about big sums of money here that if we didn't have an IFF, we wouldn't be able to go further. My last question is on, and somebody else has raised the question of the plan changes, but my understanding that any consideration of the plan change, which we are currently opposing, would need to be premised on developers coming to the party with something really significant that might make this affordable and attractive. Is that still the position that we're negotiating on?
Correct. We still have the RMA and the developer mitigation that they need to pay as part of the growth, their contribution to growth, and that will be taken into consideration in the holistic figures. There's multiple parties, developers, landowners, the beneficiaries, Crown in their multiple entities in the infrastructure that they deliver and the infrastructure that we deliver.
Sorry, Your Worship, I was just trying to help Councillor Darby amend this resolution. No more questions? Oh, Councillor Newman, sorry.
Chair, would it be fair to say, though, that although it's taken into account, that's what the answer that's just been provided to me, that in reality that never happens, does it? Because always there is a debate around what the developers are prepared to say to the commissioners in terms of their contribution to offset the cost of growth, and the shortfall between what they say and what's required and what they deliver. That's just on the capital side. And they never talk about the operating costs that they will never fund, do they? So would it be fair to say that the model that you're talking about here is a model that's is a funding cost that is passed on to the end property owner in the way of an annual fee, but the actual front-end capital cost, this isn't it, is it? It's not, ultimately this is not going to cover all of those big transmission costs, transmission infrastructure costs that are going to be required at Drury or anywhere else.
So it's fair to say that the levy is similar to a targeted rate. And the reason we need to go through this exercise is there are multiple ways that we could apply it because the legislation is so broad-ranging. That's why we pull together the people in the room to get a little bit more guidance and bring it down, and that's why we'll need to come back to you with regards to what your advice will be.
Would this targeted IFF rate cover the capital cost up front? Fund the debt required to fund the initial capital outlay for the infrastructure? Or would it fund that cost plus the depreciation of the infrastructure subsequent to it becoming live?
So the legislation only provides for it to cover capital costs, so similar to DCs.
And so the depreciation of this new infrastructure for the stuff that goes out of sequence is then to be socialised for everybody to pay for as part of our consolidated costs on the balance sheet.
Yes, that would be funded through our standard revenue sources, rates, fees and charges.
So just thinking back to the questions that Chris Darby asked before, it would be reasonable to surmise that the success of this particular model is the ability of it to ensure a stream of revenue and profit for the developers who privatise that, but the cost of it will then be passed on to the end property purchaser, and the depreciation costs will be passed on to everyone else.
Yes, and I think that's partly an answer to Councillor Hill's question earlier about when we bring options back to you, they will include timing and the ongoing operating costs, and to your point, to the how those ongoing operating costs will be funded, and before any decisions are made.
And thinking about the largest developer of all, which is the Crown, we're not even including them in this model because they're mainly in the brownfields, but we're not touching at this point because we're going to Drury first, which is the greenfields.
So our work with the Crown and the Auckland Housing Programme, we haven't begun looking at the IFF models as yet, but we do continue to work with them in thinking about both capital and operating costs.
Okay, any further questions? Well, I have a mover from Councillor Cashmore and a seconder by Councillor Darby. I'll open now for comments. Councillor Mulholland.
Happy with the recommendation, but I'm not going to, I'd like it noted that I will vote against 33. Opposition to it, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Walker.
Really, just to reinforce the need to have a number of case studies other than Drury. I mean, Drury's massive. It's got all sorts of problems attached to it. There may be other smaller areas, such as I'm suggesting, that could be successful examples. And I also endorse Councillor Darby's suggestion around brownfield areas. We need to start getting traction around that and traction around Kāinga. So we should be working on multiple fronts.
That's why the recommendations have been amended slightly. Thank you. Any other comments?
Just one, Madam Chair. I just do have a concern that this is going to drive up cost of housing for low socioeconomic people and Māori being marginalised more outside of the CBD. So I do want to register a concern around how that might be alleviated through the Act or through our approach here in these developments. I think it's a real concern that's going to be expressed by the marginalised communities.
Thank you. Comment, Councillor Darby?
That is a really important point to address. And I think that will be reflected in this work. I'm expecting it to be reflected. It's probably just a little reminder that to date, the funding has been from primarily rates or taxation sources. So the good people of Rodney, the North Shore or the West have been paying to underwrite or subsidise at tremendous levels, and we're calling that in. We're saying that we can't actually allow that level of subsidisation to occur, that the beneficiary needs to foot the bill. There will be some spread as well, because there will be some sub-regional and regional benefits, and that will be calculated. But I think fundamental to this is that the beneficiary is going to have to pay greater, and that may be reflected in house prices, but it was always reflected in house prices somehow, because another part of our organisation or government has been heavily subsidising particularly greenfield growth, but not exclusively greenfield growth, but particularly greenfield growth has been heavily subsidised to date by the good old ratepayers of Auckland and the good old taxpayers of New Zealand.
So does this localise the cost to a suburb where they traditionally lived in? Those people that lived in those outlying areas. Is that correct?
Shouldn't have done that, but yes. Okay, any more comments? Right, it's got a mover and a seconder. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. And I've noted them. Minutes, just a couple of minutes, give you a bit of a break, stand up, and I hope to do the remaining of the open agenda before lunch, all things being equal. I just thought I would share that with you. Thank you. We will resume the meeting and move now to item 12, which is our purpose of the report to seek approval for our group procurement policy. And I welcome Jazz and Russell. Can't read my own writing. So over to you, gentlemen.
Kia ora koutou, Madam Chair and members of the committee. If I can introduce, to my right is Russell Barassi, who's the manager of our procure-to-pay systems and compliance, and he has done a lot of the hard mahi in getting this redraft of the policy together and consulting with the CCOs and other stakeholders. The current group procurement policy was approved by this committee in 2017 to formalise procurement principles across council and CCOs. Before then, we had already implemented a group sourcing program in 2016 with Auckland Transport and Watercare to see if we could procure certain categories of spend as a group, as well as measure procurement benefits delivered, including cost savings and cost avoided. Together, we have had a number of successes and has seen an increased collaboration on group procurement activity since 2017. This includes working on joint procurement for categories of spend recently, like electricity, legal services, media, and a number of others. We're also able to deliver innovative procurement activity like the AC36 Alliance procurement across council and a number of CCOs. We're delivering more and more social and sustainable benefits like reduction of waste to landfill, CO2 reductions, living wage for contracted cleaners, targeting our spend with Māori Pacifica businesses, and targeted employment outcomes for people not in education, employment or training, and also increasing opportunities for local suppliers. The group procurement policy was due for review in 3 years since adoption, and we waited for the outcome of the CCO review before making any changes. The CCO review panel recommended making the policy mandatory to reduce costs and minimise duplication. We've made the changes to reflect not only the CCO review recommendation, but also changes to the way we work and our priorities. So what's changed? We've mandated certain categories of spend in the applying the policy section of the draft to be group sourced, recognising that there is some spend that is unique or strategic for each individual organisation, like public transport, for Auckland Transport, and wastewater for water care, which are not suitable to be procured as a group. There are new accountability mechanisms for non-compliance, which includes oversight by the group CFO and the CFOs of each organisation. A new principle 6, which is Safe With Us, that was recommended by Auckland Transport, and we thought right for adoption, which makes clear our priority to keep our people and our suppliers' people safe when they work with us. There are also changes to reflect our new Māori outcomes framework and our climate action framework. We've worked closely with the CCOs on these changes and have the agreement to what's in the draft, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Jazz. First question, Member Blair.
Kia ora, thank you. I have some comment regarding the sustainable procurement objectives and how they're not integrated into this policy, because I think they're something to celebrate and should be highlighted within the policy, that the 15% of total subcontract value to awarded to Māori and or Pacifica businesses. I think that's something that, do you have a comment regarding to that?
Through the Chair, we absolutely acknowledge that, and so we would incorporate the sustainable procurement objectives into the back end of the policy, and I understand that that's been communicated with the IMSB office. It was an omission on our part.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Jazz, I'm looking at your paragraph 28, and you indicate a risk that we should be cognisant of, and that is the current global supply chain issues have highlighted challenges for the Council Group, including the need to conduct enhanced due diligence on suppliers and their supply chains. Can you say a bit more about both the problems with the supply chains and what you mean by enhanced due diligence?
Through the Chair. So in terms of the problems with the supply chain, it's pretty well understood at the moment that there are shipping challenges which cause a number of delays to projects not only in Auckland but around New Zealand. But also in terms of supply chains, of where materials are sourced, etc. It can present challenges, and we also have obligations to our investors in terms of not doing business with entities that are connected with nations or organisations that are banned in certain lists. So in terms of our enhanced due diligence, that when we go out to market and if there are suppliers interested in working with us, is we do look at those risks. We also look at financial risks associated with those entities, and we look at if there are any other challenges identified about those organisations. So there is, it's difficult when we are doing those due diligence for overseas organisations if they are part of the supply chain. And we need, when we do that, we do try and gather the best evidence we can before we make decisions.
Just a supplementary to that, Jazz, when the supplier and the supply chain is overseas in a country like China or somewhere else, who do we rely on for the information with regard to, for example, the use of slave labour?
Through the Chair. When we are conducting that due diligence, it's a lot of the time we are asking the supplier or the head contractor who we have a contractual relationship with to assure us that there are no issues through their own supply chain, especially when those supply chains do get quite deep, right down to an individual componentry level in some machinery as well. So while we can do our own basic due diligence, quite often we do ask the suppliers for the information from their side as well, and that they're complying with our policy requirements.
Just a final supplementary. If there is an allegation made in another part of the country with regard to a supplier that we might have a connection with, do you do anything about that? I don't mean you personally, I mean we.
So through the chair, yes, we do indeed take any of those allegations seriously, and so I understand that this particular issue is being looked at thoroughly by Auckland Transport, and I understand that they will be coming back with a response, and they have been looking at it in terms of the supply chain and talking to the supplier.
Happy, Councillor? Good answers, right, thank you. Councillor Dalton, can you hear?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Jazz, thank you. This is really good work. Looking at paragraphs 25, where you say there's a risk that it might not be supported at the business unit level, in terms of the CCOs, does it form part of their statement of expectations?
Through the chair, I understand that all policies and complying with the group policies is part of that. I don't know if this will be specifically called out, and I'd defer to Alistair Cameron and his team, who we have been working with closely. Unfortunately, he's not in the room, but I'm happy to take that away and come back and answer your question once I've had a conversation with Alistair. But our expectation certainly is that all CCOs in the group will look to implement what's in the policy.
Thank you, Jazz.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Probably just speaking rather than questions.
Yeah, Jazz, just a question, it may be appropriate or not. In terms of this policy, I know we have a facility where we can receive unsolicited bids, and certainly as it goes to value and transparency and any number of other things, that's important. Is that, I'm going to look through it, is that captured anywhere in this policy, or does it sit somewhere else?
So through the chair, that's actually a very separate policy, which is in line for updating. We've not updated that for about 3 years, and so that'll be next cap off the rank. But any unsolicited bids are covered by our current unsolicited bids policy.
Okay, so that's separate.
Very separate, yes.
Yeah, we have an unsolicited bid policy. Happy to flick it through, John. Any other questions? We'll go now to comments. Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the overnight exchange with the Chief Financial Officer for that slight but really important amendment to under ethical consideration. And the additional words, there's a lot of red there, but the additional words are primarily comply with international standards of human rights and relevant labour laws and supply chains. Councillor Casey and I are really happy to move in second to this. This is really important. The procurement policies ensure that supplier organisations and their supply chains, not just the supplier that we might be treating with under contract, but the whole of supply chains are compliant with international standards of human rights. And I think this is now just coming to the fore more than ever. It's a healthy direction. And it's being brought out now to ensure that the suppliers of goods and services, it's not just goods, it's also services, they start to look into how those goods and services are developed at source, and that could be design or componentry, it could be the packaging arrangement. Everything that goes into that product that arrives here for Auckland Council to consume, be it through our core council or Panuku or Auckland Transport, we can track back, and we know that international standards for human rights and labour laws have been complied with. And I think that's really critical. And this is a big step for this council. This is the first time we've put this check in place. We're well aware of the persecution of minority ethnic groups around the world. In many countries, it's not one, and I'm not stressing that there is one, but this has come to our attention, both Councillor Casey and myself, from a Uyghur advocacy group. The Uyghurs are a persecuted minority in the west of China, and many tens of thousands of them are incarcerated, forced, you can add some zeros, I'm sure, forced into labour to produce goods that are exported from beyond their province and China into international markets. And I think consumers need, like ourselves, we need to know what the source of that labour and the conditions of that labour. And so this goes into that direction. We know that there's not just incarcerated labour, there's labour camps, there's forced sterilisation of women, and the list goes on. And there's evidence to support that as well. And it's highlighted in the letter that Councillors Casey, myself, and Sambai, also Councillors Hills, Henderson, Coombe and Collins have sent to the Chief Executive of Auckland Transport and the Chair of Auckland Transport. It is of real concern that there's the possibility that we have been and could be in the future procuring a product which is sourced from places and companies that have relied upon forced labour, incarcerated labour, or just the fact that people are persecuted and are cheap labour. So this is something that many international companies, many companies in New Zealand are now doing. We'll be catching up and I think leading at the same time. And it's not uncommon and it does not necessarily add to cost either. And if you take the example of the many, many companies now that are identifying the whole of supply chain carbon footprint, Icebreaker is a great example of that. Many of those companies are now saying, as well as the carbon footprint, we want to understand, how your whole of supply chain has complied with international protections, standards, labour laws, etc. So I think this is a good move for us here in Auckland. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newman. Yes, we're into comments.
Well, look, I think that the people who have drafted and signed this letter, I wasn't aware of this until it was handed to me. I don't have a problem with the approval of the policy for adoption, including the amendment, to be honest, but we will need to consider this principle in relation to every aspect of every supply chain for which we are a customer. I think of, I have absolute sympathy for the plight of those people who are persecuted in China. I have real concern for the plight of children in the Democratic Republic of the Congo who are busy mining cobalt to put in those new electric vehicle batteries that are going to have to supply the world's vehicle market as we move from combustion engines. I have concern for any type of situation whereby you have exploitation within that supply chain in order to drive down costs. So I do hope that we give this equal consideration to any purchase that we enter into, because it's not just about this particular allegation in relation to this one supplier. It is about every single labour market transaction whereby there are people around the world who are being exploited, and that exploitation is financed by the end user who purchases. So if we're going to be consistent, we'll need to be exploring this across every single transaction, both within council itself and within the Auckland Transport, Watercare, whomever, to ensure that we are complying with this principle, because it has to apply consistently.
Correct, thank you. Councillor Casey.
Yep, Daniel, that's why we'll support this unanimously today, because I'm with you. I think we should be doing it for every single one of our procurement transactions. Just to add what Councillor Darby said, couple of things. The Uyghur people wrote to us on the 25th of May, and it was an issue. The question that was asked by Inian and Darroch was, can you indicate whether Auckland Council is buying buses made by forced labour? And the fact is, I still can't answer that. And that does concern me, and that's because of, you know, as Jazz mentioned, the deep chains that go, that we can't access, really. And I hope that this amendment changes that so that we have a definitive statement from the main contractor that all parts supplied, which is what we're talking about here with the buses, parts supplied come from ethical employers. And that's really what this is about. Just the second thing I wanted to say was that the Minister, Michael Wood, is currently looking at new legislation to outlaw slavery, especially in supply chains overseas, so that we are unable to buy them, and that would be really good. I think that when that comes through, this council should be supportive of that.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Mayor Goff.
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, I support the amendment, and I certainly believe that we have to have very strong standards in terms of not purchasing things that have been produced by slave labour or forced labour. There's a couple of qualifications, I think, in it. I think Councillor Darby mentioned the word cheap labour. Well, gosh, go to the warehouse, you wouldn't be buying anything if it wasn't cheap. So I don't think this covers cheap labour. I think it covers slave labour and forced labour. But I also noticed, look, I accept that the Uyghurs are being persecuted in a way that is utterly unacceptable and disgraceful. But what strikes me in the quote from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute is the word potentially. Now, we need to know not whether it's potentially, but whether it is or it isn't. So somewhere along the line, we need to look at what sort of evidential standard we require. We ought to do due diligence, but I suspect that due diligence ought to be done through a central government agency that has the links and the capacity rather than ourselves. So there's nothing in that amendment that I have any concern about. I support it wholeheartedly. I absolutely oppose the use of slave labour. There are United Nations resolutions around that, or forced labour. But I think the challenge for us will be to find the evidential standard that needs to be satisfied. If I'd thought that the CRRC was using slave labour, I wouldn't have supported the purchase of the buses, but I really don't know. And I think you said that, Councillor Casey, before you stop a purchase, but preferably before you go ahead with it, you need to have a hard level of evidence and evidence that can be relied on. And I think we do need to work closely with central government in order to assure ourselves that we have that level of evidence. Before we purchase any more buses, we would want to have the assurance that wherever we purchase it from, this is not being done by slave or forced labour.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, final comment.
Sure. In respect of this issue, our council is not alone. Many other cities are, if anything, ahead of us in this game. And I'm just mindful that not too many years ago, we were part of a sustainable procurement group organised by ICLEI. We're no longer part of that. And I just bring to council's attention that one of the most efficient ways that you can deal with things that are international is by being part of networks and sharing information with other cities. Because I can assure you other cities, especially in Germany, Sweden and the like, Malmo, for example, are ahead of us around this sort of issue. It's often incredibly efficient and far more economical for us to share that information with other cities that we can do under a trusting relationship rather than try and reinvent the wheel ourselves. So I just put that up. I continue to raise these issues around our relationship with other cities and the way we have truncated them over some time and the costs associated with that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, just in closing the debate, although it's focused on one particular part of the policy, I just want to bring it back to what it was designed to do in the first thing, which of course, you know, we've been doing this for a while. It was part of the value for money from 2017, which is, the putting together group procurement activity, and we've had some real success already in the likes of our electricity, our legal services and media and a number of others. So the procurement benefits number, noting this is a finance meeting, in recommendation C, include the validated procurement benefits for us as a parent of 44.7 million, that's in paragraph 26 of the report, Auckland Transport 16.5 million and Watercare 6 million for the year ending 2021. The projected benefits looking forward for 21-22 are a best estimate at this stage, but we're obviously working with our CCOs to build on that respective procurement pipeline. This is also the last of the 64 recommendations from the CCO review that we are acting on as well. And I think, it's also worth noting that we're delivering more and more social and sustainable procurement benefits like reduction of waste to landfills, CO2 reductions, living wage for contracted cleaners, measuring our spend with Māori and Pacifica businesses, targeted employment outcomes, and increasing opportunities for local suppliers. So I just want to go back to the sort of true part of the policy. I absolutely support the ethical consideration inclusion, and I would just say to the writers of the letter, I'm only sorry that you didn't share it a bit widely, because I think there would have been more signatures. I was not aware of the letter at all until I saw the reply to the letter. So respectfully, I think that would have been a nice thing to happen. But all in all, I got another comment from Councillor Darby.
Yeah, well, look, I don't really want to exercise the right of reply formally, but I just do want to make the point. I think the point that Councillor Newman and Councillor Casey make about this applying not just to any one city or country is really important. It's quite fundamental to the direction that's being outlined here. And Councillor Casey and we are expecting a formal reply, and the other councillors, to our letter. On the letter, members, sometimes, we responded, we socialised it with a few. I think we asked our governance advisors to test it with a few councillors. Look, I just don't have the time to lift the phone and ring 21 councillors on an issue like that. I'm sorry. You've got to get things done, and that's what we were doing. We were just getting stuff done. And in terms of the cheap labour, Mayor, the international definition of that does not just apply to the cost of that labour, that is the wages or lack of wages. It does apply to the conditions of labour. So the definition of cheap labour does apply to the conditions in which labour activity is performed. And in some parts of the world, it's pretty atrocious. And Councillor Newman just highlighted only one example, and there are literally thousands. Thank you.
So thank you. I think that rounds off the debate. We have a mover in Councillor Darby, seconded by Councillor Casey. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 13, insurance renewals, strategy and progress on options for these arrangements. And I welcome Varsha, Mark and John Bishop. Thank you.
Kia ora, and thank you for the chair. Just a quick introduction. I introduce Varsha Prasad immediately to my right there. Varsha stepped into Amit's shoes as acting insurance manager. And of course, John Bishop, Group Treasurer, directly to my right here. In the confidential agenda this afternoon, there is a report seeking approval of the indicative 2022 group insurance renewal, the proposed 3-year strategy, and an update for the committee on progress with respect to the insurance options work and the cumulative loss modelling work on our assets. The purpose of this paper, it's a very short process paper, outlines the approach taken for the 2020 renewal and a heads up in terms of next steps in terms of the insurance options work and the cumulative loss modelling. So given us a short process paper, I'll take the paper as read and happy to open up to any questions.
Right, noting this will be in the confidential, so any questions on process only now, please. Any comments? I'll move it. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mulholland. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Last item in open is the, no, it's not quite, 2 items to go. She said, getting hungry. Item 14, the summary of Finance and Performance Committee information and briefings. Now, this normally just goes through, but I just want to highlight that this is absolutely releasing all material EP workshops that have been held over the 158, 9, 10, 60, whatever it is, hours that we've done. It's 1,689 pages, so it'll give good reading for someone. But it's more importantly, it's part of our standard practice in proactively releasing our information from workshops to the public to improve openness and transparency of decision making. I'll just leave it there. Happy to, yes, you can. I'll just move it. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cooper. A question from Councillor Casey,
Is
then
it the
Councillor Newman.
presentations in the workshops, or is it the notes from the workshops, or the questions that emanated from the workshops, or is it all three?
It's minutes and presentations. Councillor Newman.
Not on this item, Chair, but I'm just wondering, in lieu of the progress that we've made, whether you consider just keep going and we'll deal with the confidential matters and then adjourn the meeting proper rather than coming back after lunch.
I'll take that when I get to the end of the open, but if that's all right with you?
I hear the din. There was a question. I think that those who object to it can object a little bit quieter than they.
Right, no more questions or comments on this item. I've got a mover and I've got a seconder with Councillor Cooper. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Item 15 that was the penultimate. This is the ultimate. Summary of confidential decisions and related information released into open. I'll move. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Walker? Thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you very much. I will take it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. There is no extraordinary business, so I will now move a procedural motion to exclude the public. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Hills? On precluding the comment. Thank you, Councillor Darby. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. We're going into confidential.
So it's just
right. Sorry.